So you just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm trying to get some of our folks in remotely.
Great. I'll say before we get started that we appreciate that Julie especially worked so hard to learn all these new rules. And I'm sure you'll be relieved to know that next month's meeting will probably be completely different again, as the governor is asked for an extraordinary session of the legislature, which started today, to do, amongst other things, change the open meetings law to allow for virtual participation. Yeah, which we've been, I know many of us have been lobbying for. It's really hindered a lot of our boards and committees. A lot of folks who have served for many, many years don't feel comfortable coming back in person, and we still want their talents and their contributions to this work. So really good news for the functioning of the city, really bad news for Julie, as she will have to figure out all over again how to make these city meetings work in a hybrid format. I want to appreciate, too, everybody who is here continuing to wear your masks throughout the duration of the meeting. For the folks who might be watching at home, may not see the social distancing that's happening in the crowd, we appreciate that, and pulling that off requires quite a bit of forethought. The evacuation plan for those who are here, there's an exit in the back, exit also in the front. In case of an emergency, we do ask folks to huddle. Oh, it's actually interesting. Used to be the Green Street parking garage, does not exist anymore as of like 2 days ago. So we'll meet at Cuga Street. We'll meet at Green and Cuga in case of an evacuation. Just head out one of those. We meet at the Chanticleer, cause an emergency of a different sort. I think that's all the housekeeping I've got. You think we're good? Okay. Now call the meeting. Yes, they're good about that. I'll check for texts from my mom. Is there? We'll call the meeting to order. Any changes to the agenda? And I appreciate council's patience with some last-minute additions. Yes, Seth.
The only thing we wanted to clarify, a vote we took on the north side housing that was last month. There was a slight change that's needed. I think Julie emailed everybody the correct resolution. So I guess we'll address that during the planning committee meeting just to make sure that we're all comfortable moving forward with this amended resolution.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll add that under planning. North side. All right, then we'll begin. We actually have a couple of presentations. We've got 3 presentations today. And so we want to move to those, but first I have an award that I'd like to give out to someone who I actually served with 14 years ago was when we began serving together on the Common Council, if you can believe it. Whereas, for almost 10 years, Mary Tomlin has served as City of Ithaca historian. Whereas in her role as City of Ithaca historian, Mary Tomlin shared her deep knowledge of the city's history with the community through countless written reports and articles, enriching our understanding of the city's growth, development, tragedies, and achievements. And whereas Mary Tomlin's extensive research and writing on the life and career of architect William Henry Miller is unparalleled, and her study of him revealed the role he played in shaping the Cornell University campus and the city of Ithaca. And whereas Mary's dedication to her work as city historian stands as an outstanding example for other municipal historians throughout New York State. And whereas the high quality and comprehensive nature of Mary Tomlin's historical research and public presentations have been significant contributions to the city of Ithaca for many years and will inform future generations. And whereas Mary Tomlin generously provided her expertise on the built environment and the natural environment with many city boards, committees, commissions, and the general public helping to tell the story of Ithaca and its residents. For all those reasons and so many more, this was a position that really was created by Mary Tomlin, because even before she was the City of Ithaca historian, she was the City of Ithaca historian, both on and off Common Council. She kept the minutes of the city, so important, and was really a grounding force for those of us who had to make decisions about it. But it also I found, made living in the city more enjoyable And I still, to this day, will bore guests, because I'm like, that's a William Henry Miller house. And they're like, well, we don't know who that is. I'm like, you should. And I'll show you 3 other examples of it. Well, for all those reasons and more, I would like to, as mayor, proclaim and offer our gratitude and thanks to the retiring city historian, Mary Tomlin, and urge all in our community to thank and celebrate Mary's numerous contributions to the city of Ithaca that has touched so many lives in such a profound way. Congratulations.
Do you?
3-minute limit. No limit.
Well, yes, I could tell you a lot. But I wanted to thank you for this, and all of you for this opportunity. I've been a beneficiary of being in this position because I've been asked to do research on things that were new to me. And I have learned a lot. I only regret that I've not been more proactive in addressing the interests of many people. Briefly, I want to tell you, and I will try to be brief. I know what it's like to sit here and say, will we ever get to the meat of the meeting? Local history can be entertaining, it can be informative, and it can be significant. Entertaining is when reading about the trainers of circus animals who, after a long, hot parade, took them down to Fall Creek to wade in the creek. I can't go across a bridge down there without seeing giraffes and rhinoceroses and things that would have gone viral today. It can be informative, as the discussions of bicycle fad in the late 19th century and some of the issues there when one rented a bike and tried to learn how to use it. The problem was they were trying to ride it on the fairgrounds racetrack, and there was a horse and carriage also there. The trials of the time. To the significant, and that was my last assignment, which was to do a history of policing in Ithaca, a topic I had never researched before. And while my research was very rudimentary, it was awesome to try to present it against to people who were much more knowledgeable than I. But it indicated some significant aspects of the past in policing that I think we all need to be aware of, and that really help us inform questioning material about the police role today. Guidance, inspiration, and appreciation. So for all those reasons, thank you so much. And thank you.
In Mary's trademark humility, of course, downplays her many contributions, including what was a fascinating and extremely useful report to the Reimagining Public Safety Group about the history of policing in Ithaca. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for working right up to the wire. You kept going. Yes, much appreciated. Next, we do have a couple special presentations. Speaking of reimagining, our Director of Human Resources, Shelley Michelle Nunn, who's one of the liaisons to the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, is going to provide a brief update.
Julie, in the meantime, if you just click view full screen, it should come up to the whole screen. Yeah, view on the top.
We'll get there.
And then full screen mode.
Okay. Thank you, Dominic.
Anytime.
Julie, let me know when we're ready. Oh, great. All right. Good evening, everyone. For those who may not know me, I am Shelley Michelle Nunn, as the mayor said, Director of Human Resources for the City of Ithaca. I also serve on the project management team for the Reimagining Public Safety, which is why I am here tonight with you. I have to remember to change the slide. Yes. So it's important that we keep in the forefront of our minds what the executive order has basically asked us to do. It's clear in the order that this work is being done to address racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. And that must be centered in terms of this process, that those voices, the voices of the community of color, must be centered, and they have to be engaged, and in some cases, leading this process. Also, in terms of our charge, council, you all know, you and the legislative bodies passed a resolution giving us direction in terms of what we needed to do. All the work that we're doing is inclusive. When we're working collaboratively, the city, the town, and our outside consultants. We've also been asked to create and implement a community justice center. I just want to talk a little bit about collaboration. This is truly a collaborative, a collaboration, and it involves many, many players. First, I want to acknowledge my colleagues, Deanna Carruthers and Dominic Recchio, who have been with this initiative since the first phase. They each have intimate knowledge of the plans and the process, and they are truly the engine of this plane that we are flying while we are building it. This is a saying that the mayor always says, and it really feels like that. We're in the plane, we're flying, but at the same time, we're building it. Also joining our team this phase has been Melody Faraday from Public Information Office, and she is adding extreme value. Her focus is on communications around, specifically geared toward the city and the city initiatives. And last, just to acknowledge the Center for Policing Equity. The CPE brings a host of expertise, tools, and capacity to the table. They are our strategic partners. They focus on the logistics and organizational structure. Their expertise in law enforcement is invaluable. They offer data, statistics, and just many tools that enable us and help us with our efforts, specifically around community engagement and those strategies. I did it. So for tonight, we just want to touch on these 4 areas, and I'll talk specifically about 3 of them later, but I just wanted to lift up on this slide, the City of Ithaca Working Group, which has convened, and you had a presentation by Duxon not too long ago to give you an update there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want you to know that the working group has been working very diligently with a lot of dedication and diving into this work. They are now in the process where they're doing call delineation and looking at the different call types that police are called out on. And last week, they worked with more than 60 call types that they did sort of what we're calling a gut check, and they sort of placed them in different categories. And now we will be bringing in our technical advisors to meet with them and to react to where some of the places that they put these call types are, and also to provide information, from their experience and their expertise. Where things sit right now, they will change. They will change based upon more information, and they'll also change based upon input from our community. So let me just move through and talk a little bit about the Community Justice Center. What happened? Hang in there. Yeah, here we go. So the Community Justice Center, this is the entity that is responsible for the implementation of the plans. And right now we have a search going on where we are in the process of recruiting and looking to hire the project director as well as the data analysts. Those searches have been extended so that we can have more time to do outreach and hopefully attract some strong candidates. In addition to that, we'll have a interview committee that will be comprised of city and county elected officials, staff, as well as community members. Remember, community members are centered here, so they are involved in every aspect of the process. The Community Justice Center now will be staffed with a project director and a project analyst, but we feel very strongly that because of the amount of work that needs to be done, that these individuals will need to be supported by administrative support. So I'm just giving you a heads up about that. It's very much needed. Right now, in terms of location, both Deanna and Dominic have been literally, walking the pavement, looking for suitable facilities to house the Community Justice Center. It's important that we have a location that is accessible, and it also needs to be a location where the county information technology department can support them technologically. So that's underway. We haven't settled on anywhere yet, but we're diligently working in that direction. In addition, with the Community Justice Center, we are right now looking at establishing the advisory board subcommittee. And this is a subcommittee that the charge really is to create the guidelines for long-term advisory committee, which is part of the plan. And so we have invitations out to individuals to participate in that process. And once the advisory, the permanent one, the advisory committee for this initiative, they will guide and advise the plans and implementation of our process. So plan sequencing. So as you can imagine, because of the number of plans that exist, more than a dozen, actually closer to 24 plans. This is a highly complex process. And what we have had to do is look at all of the plans and put in place a sequencing process. We can't do everything all at once, and some things need to happen before other things in order to do to complete the next phase. So we have put together this massive matrix that has all of the plans and the sequence of the order in which they will occur. And right now, we're focused on of course, reimagining IPD and the community healing plan. The community healing plan is really critical. This will address the trauma that exists in the community. It will focus, we talked about it focusing on the relationships between the community and police, and it will certainly do that. But we're finding too that within communities, there needs to be some healing. So we will be looking to do that. We have a framework that has been provided to us by CPE, and this is going to be a massive initiative in our community in order to do it right, and that's our intent, is to do it right and have very positive effects as a result of it. And also, work is continuing on the basically, we're still evaluating existing models, alternative models that are out there. We do have a few that pretty well known, the Eugene model, the Camden model, there's a Colorado model and others, but we really need to get to focus on looking at all the various different models that are out there. So we will probably be working with outside consultants or resources in order to get this done. And then I'll just mention briefly that we do have a rollout process, and it's related to the next slide, which is our website and community engagement tool. I just want to say that this is extremely exciting. I have to thank Dominic and his team, Deanna and Melody, on all the work that they have done. This will be an opportunity for the community to engage in this process, basically on an almost real-time basis. Dominic is going to be providing us with a demonstration just so you have an idea of what to expect. We did send, I think you should have received invitations to sign up and sort of play around with it. But this is a tool that's going to be heavily used to communicate, to get information out to the community. And I know that some of you are saying or thinking that everybody doesn't have access to technology. We also have a plan in place to enable people who don't have access to be able to utilize this tool too. So we're very aware of it, and we have, plans for those who may not have access to get access to this process. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Dominic, and do I have to share? And then Dominic will just give us a demonstration of the tool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I think I should be able, you'll need to stop your share before I'm able to do that. All right, great. Let's see here, 1 second. Great, you all should be able to see that now there. So as Shelley showed, this is the URL people can go to get to this website is publicsafetyreimagined.org or .com. It works with either one. And I'm going to do a very high level overview. I know you all have a lot of stuff on your agenda tonight. And we're going to talk about what this website does and how people can interact with it. And interested in any questions from Common Council afterward, if you have any, after Shelley's done with the rest of the presentation. So the website is broken up into sort of 3 different sections. What you see here and what is open to the public is the community engagement portion. That includes these plans and ideas, and I'll go over those in a minute. The other things that this does is it allows us to have a news feed, and I'll click into that to show you as well, where we can post all updates that we have about the plans that we put in place and the process as we go along. And it also allows us to do project management in the back end. Everything from assigning different tasks to project managers or to working group members. Working group members would be able to use this to rate different ideas, things like that. So there's a lot of functionality, but really what we're kicking this off with is the community engagement functionality. So you can see here, this is the homepage of the website, and you can see what's described as plans here, and we'll use the community healing plan as a sample. So each of those dozens of plans that Shelley was speaking about will be added to this website one at a time. And we've really kicked off with the healing plan and the unarmed first responders. Once you click into one of these plans here, and I'm signed into my account, so you might see my name pop up in a few places, it asks a prompt here. So, you know, we're looking at the healing plan and we're looking for the community to tell us their ideas under this prompt. You know, describe the actions needed to move the process forward in developing a comprehensive healing plan. What is your role? And then describe the role of the community in the healing process. And there's a little bit more information here. So if I'm a member of the community and I'm really interested in figuring out how we integrate this healing plan well, I can go ahead and suggest an idea by submitting one here. And I'm going to just use a sample idea of talking circles. So I'd put in the title of my idea is talking circles, and I'll come down here and I will describe my idea. So I'll just do a very rudimentary description here and say groups of diverse community members coming together to talk through complex issues. I can describe it as thoughtfully as I'd like. I am going to put sample here, so when I submit this, anyone who's using the website will know that. I can add an image, and we've provided dozens and dozens of great images of the city and county that the community can use, and we're taking photos of all of the justice murals around the city of Ithaca as well that people can use to represent their ideas. Let's say I was working on this with Deanna. I can search for a co-author and add Deanna to that. And then I could add an attachment. Maybe it's an article I've read or something like that. I could select it to be anonymous because it's a sample one. I'm going to do that. And this is probably one of the only plans that will allow confidential access. That would come just to the working groups or just to the staff and volunteers working on it. But for now, I'm not going to bother clicking that. I'll click submit, and you can see, it's a little slow here, sorry about that. Yeah, you can see that I've submitted that plan, and this is what will show up under my idea here. So the top here shows how far along in the process it is. Every single idea submitted by community members have to go through an evaluation process. So it'll have our working groups and our staff evaluating every idea that the community submits. And ideally, we have hundreds of ideas across our different plans that community members are adding. You can see all the details here. You can add a comment on the plan, or on my idea. So if I'm looking at someone else's idea and I like it or think it could be changed or want my perspective to be heard on it, I can add a comment. Most of our plans will allow sort of a 5-star voting system. This particular one doesn't. Healing plan is something that's very personal, and we wanted to remove that sort of voting on things from this particular one. So the other thing that's really exciting about this is that people can subscribe to things. So if I'm looking at someone else's idea, I can click to subscribe to all updates that happen on it. Any new changes, any way it moves along the process here, etc. And the last thing I'll show you before I hop out of the shared screen is when there are a few ideas, you can sort of explore the different ideas that people have put in. So members of the community will be able to go to this and see oh, wow, there's, a couple of ideas here. I can engage with these. I can leave comments. Here, for example, I haven't voted on this one, but this is suggesting that for animal barking complaints, it's an unarmed response in the future. And I can click, I really like that. I'm going to give that 5 stars. I think that's a great use for an unarmed response. And you can see there that both of these have an average of 5 stars. And in addition to the plans and ideas, there's that news function I talked about earlier too, where everything that we do related to reimagining public safety, all of our press releases and recordings like this one we have tonight will all live here in sequence one by one. And I'll make sure that image of Deanna doesn't keep cutting off that way. But this should be really a comprehensive one-stop shop for people who are looking to get more information on the process, provide their input and ideas, react to other people's input and ideas, and then it'll allow us as staff and elected officials, volunteers, et cetera, to gauge ideas, see what works, and then help implement them over time. And that's all I have, unless there are any questions. And I don't know if there were any more slides, Shelley.
Yeah, no, I just had the last slide, and I was just going to open it up for questions if there are any. And Deanna and Melody, you're welcome to take your mute off too. Are there questions? What
Yes,
didn't
Cynthia.
you hear about?
Yes, Cynthia, go ahead.
Thank you for that presentation, and that looks like an incredibly powerful website. Thank you for doing that. So am I understanding correctly that people need to register to be able to use that site? And in the registration process, will they indicate where they live so we can understand if they're a city resident, a town resident, or they live in Arizona or some other place?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it does ask demographic questions as well that are optional. So we'll be able to look at the signups and see or answers or comments, et cetera, and look at everything from race to income to neighborhood, et cetera, and see who we're missing as well. So then we can go out and try to pull those people into the process. And as Shelley mentioned earlier, there are various plans to meet the needs of people who may not have direct access to the internet at home. And this has been shared with, and all of the local libraries and librarians have engaged with this, so they know how to train community members or walk them through or things like that.
So would it also have protections to make sure that these are actual people?
Yeah, there are certainly some things built into the software to protect for that. And because it's I'm trying to think, dual factor authentication, I think is what they call it. So you have to come in, you have to sign up with an email, and it's not just an automated process. So it won't allow typical bots or things like that to come in.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
That's a good question. Yes, Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And Dominic and Shelley, thank you for that presentation. So I guess if this has been done previously in terms of reimagining, as you mentioned, some of the other communities that have done this, do you have any sense of what would be a kind of good response to this in terms of the amount of kind of engagement and ideas? As you said, you're going to monitor the inputs on this, but do you have a sense of what successful community engagement is in terms of, either numbers or some other metrics?
I can let you, do you want to start, Shelley, or you want me to start?
Yeah, I definitely want you to start.
Okay. Well, I can say that or Deanna, do you have things?
Sure, I would just want to contextualize the answer to this. When we think about minoritized voices, it's never the number. It's really, we really try to look at a qualitative perspective. And so what we know, we will have feedback from multiple dimensions of equity. And so when we think about that, whether it is the Black or brown folks, but folks with ability or disability, the way in which we receive feedback will be through this tool, but it also may be through paper forms or something like that, depending on what we do. It could be through, because Dom has lots of brilliant ideas, it could be through the newspaper. And so we look at the totality of feedback as I just wanted to frame this in terms of this feedback. We also can tell, for example, I'm sure you've all had this before, you may get an email of 1,000, they all say the same thing. And so we always have to look across spectrum and looking across different dimensions to be able to answer that. And so we will look at some of those numbers, but I also would just caution or say that's one of many things that we try to do as we look at this. And also knowing that Tompkins County and the city of Ithaca are unique is an understatement. I think it's an extremely dynamic community. So when we say that, we're gonna, they say my mom used to always say they broke the mold when they made me. I think they broke the mold when they created Tompkins County and the city of Ithaca. And so we're starting something new. And I think the numbers will tell one story, but also engagement will be through the numbers, but also will be through spaces like this. We will need you to help train and encourage other people to use it as well. And so our engagement will, again, not just be through what we get from this, but how we see the power of the influence and it multiplying over a series of time. So Dom, I know you have another answer, but I just thought that might be helpful to frame how we think about the entirety of the process.
Great.
Yeah, that's great context, Deanna. I completely agree. And I'll just add that while it's an incredibly powerful way for people to input their ideas, our expectation will also be that all of the ideas of working groups or staff, et cetera, also get put into this. Even if the plan is to implement them over time, we're still going to put them in as ideas so that people can track them along the process. So yes, it's certainly about the input, but it's also about giving people that way to say, oh, okay, maybe I don't have an idea today, but I do want to follow along what the working group is doing. It's a transparency mechanism as well. And your other part of the question was on whether we've heard from or seen how other communities have engaged community along in their process. And from what I've seen in studying them and from us talking specifically to the Whitebird Clinic in Eugene, Oregon over time, was it's really iterative. And I think their community engagement came a little bit later in the process, to be honest. I think ours is, we're starting out from day one with something like this, where they saw a crisis, they needed to approach it in a different way, and they tried things out and iterated over time a lot. So I did think about that through our process of creating this and looked into that a bit and looked back at our meeting with the Whitebird folks, and certainly their innovation was a little bit different and a little bit more based on trying something, seeing what worked, and then moving on to the next thing. Whereas we're trying to collect all that information on the front end.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, which is good news. So yes, and this tool, we did send it to everybody in council last week, so you got a heads up. But that is going live for everybody in the public this week. So please do feel free not only to use it, but to spread the news on your listservs, social media, et cetera. Thank you.
There will be a press release going out within a couple days. I'll just add that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dominic. Thanks, Deanna. Oh, yes.
One final thing, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is our first presentation of our monthly presentation. So we thank you, Shelley, and the Common Council for allowing us to do the first presentation of our again, monthly cycle. We will do the same presentation or something similar at the legislators meeting on the 7th, I believe it's next Tuesday. And so you'll see the same group of folks, but we'll be doing this monthly. And so we want to be transparent, we want to be accountable, and we thank you for this opportunity, and we appreciate your questions and giving us the opportunity to refine the message for the community so that we can meet expectations. So thank you for this.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks again, Deanna. And thank you, Melody, Shelley.
Thank you.
And Dominic. Great. So we'll move now to our next presentation, which is the Ithaca Farmers Market redesign.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. As you know, or may know, you should know, the farmers market is in the process of redesigning both the design and the actual construction is going to be grant funded. And as it's on city land, as you all know, it's such an iconic area for people, and many of your constituents, as well as you, feel ownership of this. So, and as this council is an involved agency in the environmental review, we really wanted to take some time for you to understand what they're proposing and give feedback, and also know the schedule and have answers for people who ask you about what's happening there. So I'm going to leave the table. You can sit here and introduce yourself, and thank you very much for letting us have some of your time.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Kate Chesbrough. I'm here.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. My name is Kate Chesbrough. I'm here from Whittam Planning and Design. I'm joined by Anton Burkett, representing the farmers market. And we'll go through these slides as quickly as we can to give everyone an overview of where we are in process, so we can jump in. So the next slide is, if you go to the next, an overview of where we are in space. The farmers market is, the market is the namesake of the new market district for the rezoned area of the West End. The survey plan on the right-hand side shows some of the existing conditions. A diagram that we'll show soon will show some of the site constraints that we're working within. And as Lisa mentioned, the site as we know it is very familiar to so many people. The market has been there since 1988, I believe, and it attracts thousands on a typical weekend. And so if we go to the next slide, this is a diagram that shows the context that the market is within. It's just a diagram showing the plans that are in the pipeline for some significant changes in this area of the city. And the market is really looking forward to being a part of those changes. As we look at some of the developments that are coming online, we will have at the market many new neighbors that will be able to see the market from their apartments, be able to walk their dogs right there. The site is going to change relatively quickly, and the market is planning and expecting to be part of that change. So let's go to the next. One of the earliest diagrams that we did and have shown during meetings so far is this kind of site constraints diagram. There are a number of easements that run through the site. The easement shown in an orange color is a NYSEG easement. There are large utility overhead lines, and in the purple, that is the sewer easement. The sewer easement currently is underneath the footprint of the market building, and there's another on the bottom side of the property line shown here. So we are working with a small group from the wastewater treatment facility to talk through some of those existing easements and how it relates to the plans for this project. Let's go to the next. So we brought up a few images to remind all of us what it is like there in, let's go back one, what it's like at the existing parking area. It has its charm, as as many of us know. It's there's a lot of community effort that went into the plantings there, but it also has its inefficiencies. The gravel lot is difficult to maintain. Not sure if you've ever had to park in a really big puddle there, but it is inefficient and difficult to see where you're headed, especially as a first-time user there. So let's go to the next. So the waterfront is a truly beloved part of the farmers market site. It's different throughout the seasons. People do use this as a true public open space. It's right on the Cayuga Waterfront Trail, and it is beloved and beautiful and could even be improved. There are some challenges, though. The way that the interface of the trail goes through this site makes it difficult to see where you're headed, especially if you're on a bike. And there are true accessibility issues with steps and uneven paving. Let's go to the next slide. There's a couple of other issues. On the left side, you can see that this site just has a lot of pressure. The market is very busy and people want to be on the waterfront. There's a lot of programmatic uses of this space, so we're looking at that. And on the right side, you can see that the way that the site is used now, cars do drive on the waterfront. A lot of those are functionally necessary for vendors to access their booths during market. It's also currently the emergency access route, and that will change as part of the site redesign. So those are some of the existing conditions on the waterfront. Let's go to the next. We're looking at the building that is really a cultural touchstone for what it is like to live and study in Ithaca. It has tremendous tourism and economic value to our local vendors and people that come to visit this space. So as we go to the next images, though, there are really inspiring elements of the craft, the light, the openness, the quality of wood that's at the existing building. It is truly a beloved space. But as we look further at this, if we go to the next slide, there are issues around this building. The exterior is, especially if you had to wait in line during our past COVID years, you can see that the exterior of the building is truly dominated by cars. It's really an inward-facing experience. During any windy or rainy events, weather makes its way into the market and can really disturb events that are going on. Let's go to the next slide. The accessibility of the site is pretty poor. It makes it difficult for many people to get around the building. And the bathrooms that are there are not adequate to meet the needs of people visiting the site. And one last slide as we look at the cooking functionality and safety and code compliance of existing conditions. Vendors are truly ingenious in their ways of making it work. They're on site now, but the design team is looking at how we can make this function better in the future. Let's go to the next. So we wanted to give an overview of the farmers market's planning process and public outreach efforts that we've done to date. Let's go next. In 2016, the market began its strategic planning process, and a lot of this is probably familiar to members of this board, as the market team has been in front of the board as it's been doing these. So the strategic plan in 2016 then led to a feasibility study for a new parking area and a circulation study. In 2020, there was a study for a new year-round building on the site. And as part of all of this planning, the market has really learned the importance of the market to so many people. They've done a lot of their own outreach to the community. They did a survey with over 150 responses. Within their own group of vendors, there are vendor committees that have grown over time, working with local governments, as well as groups from Cornell and the local farming and food organizations. So some of the priorities as part of their planning, though, really identified the parking and the building as real priorities as they look at the future. Let's go to the next. So in April of 2020, the market issued 2 requests for qualifications, which led to our firm, Whittam Planning and Design, leading the site design process with our consultants at Shoemaker Civil Engineers and Sienna Environmental Engineers. So we're handling those elements of the project right now. And N Architects, a Brooklyn-based architectural firm, will be handling the building design. As Lisa mentioned, this is a grant-funded and phased project. This year and right now, we're in the middle of a site design for the parking area that will take that all the way to 100% design, with the hope that that will be constructed in 2022. We just met with the planning board for our first time in their meeting that just happened in August. So we are getting, hopefully, seeker approval of the whole project this year. And that will include the parking improvements, waterfront improvements, and the design for the new building. The final design of the new building will happen later. And so this year, again, final site plan for parking, seeker for the whole thing in 2022, hoping for construction of the parking area. Hopefully then in 2023, we'll do the improvements to the waterfront, which includes a trail realignment to accommodate the building and so on. And then around 2025, pending fundraising and other efforts, there will be the new building / pavilion. And let's go on. We've done public outreach of our own as part of this design process this year. That's been both virtual and in person. We've been reaching out to the vendor groups with an online survey. We got 57 responses then, and the market continues to coordinate with them. And for the public survey that was put out, we got just shy of 600 responses, and we heard loud and clear that there are real priorities for many people as part of this redesign that include enhanced parking and access generally for customers and for vendors, more gathering spaces, a year-round capability for operations, bathrooms. There are really special elements to preserve at this site. People are looking to see some significant and unique features like outdoor seating and views to the inlet. And everybody hates the potholes and dust. We also appreciate, as Lisa said, that many people are very connected to the way that the market is today. And that also came across quite clearly in the outreach that we've done. So we're doing our best to answer what we've heard as part of all of that. And let's keep going. Oh, sorry. And finally, we'll show you some of the schematic designs that are out there now. We're, as we said, working with the planning board. We've just started that process. So let's go to the next slide. Some of our goals for the site redesign. We're really focusing on two main user groups. Those are the customers and the vendors that have very unique needs for the use of the site. Maintaining and enhancing the natural beauty of this waterfront site at Steamboat Landing. Thinking about multimodal circulation for bicyclists, walking, as well as a bus connection here. Overall clarification of circulation throughout the site. Increasing the parking capacity to the extent possible. Enhancing pedestrian safety. Enhancing sight lines to the market and to the water. And integrating stormwater runoff with planting areas and paving where possible. Let's go to the next drawing. This conceptual layout is the one that's been shared to date, and it shows the overall plan. Again, these are phased and will happen over time, but as we look at the parking layout here, this shows much more open sight lines from 3rd Street toward the building, so as you're approaching, you can clearly see your destination. This shows bioretention areas between the parking stalls. As you get closer to the building, you can access the building either on foot, you can take the route that's there on the waterfront trail, and there are new sidewalks. But as you get closer to the building, there will be a pedestrian promenade that vendors will be able to load and unload from, but then park away from the building. They'll be able to access the site with their vehicles, but then park away from it. So this is an overall picture of what we're thinking for the parking and the waterfront. We'll focus on those for the site design. If we go to the next slide, quickly, we wanted to mention that during the upcoming September Planning Board meeting, there will be a discussion, as we often do, of an updated design that we think responds better to the sense of scale and preserving some of the character of the existing parking area screening the views between the market and the wastewater treatment facility, and preserving, again, to the extent possible, some of the existing mature trees that are there. If we go to the next slide, this shows the schematic first floor plan for the new market building. So the market building, if you can notice the center area, that will be the year-round winterized portion of the building. It's in the middle, so it's sort of like a building surrounded by a pavilion, but it's all under one roof. And if we go to the next slide, we wanted to really clearly show that this new building design really opens up the market in more ways than one to people coming in from all different directions. So this has much more porosity. There are multiple entrance points. And the way that the market stalls are arranged, those are the teal colors, creates these volumes for seating and other functions that happen at the market, like weddings, parties, things like that. And the yellow lines that face in and out are just a nod toward the fact that the design team is trying to make the market more outward facing than it is today. So this will give the vendors the opportunity to sell facing the waterfront or facing the promenade. So it won't all be within the building. You'll be able to see people buying and selling and chatting, hanging out through all around the building. And let's go to the last. This just shows the second floor plan. There will be gathering spaces as well as a conference room for market staff up there, and it'll be a pretty sweet view from that level as well. And that does it for our slides. Thank you all for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Yes, Laura.
Thank you. And I also got a text from someone just asking if, and I know it's hard with masks, but if each one of us, including presenters, can speak loudly and directly into the microphone. And then I did have a question. This is very exciting, for one thing, so thank you for your presentation. My question is, so the design, the conceptual design is for a 2-story building. What, and I understand that it's conceptual at this stage, but what is the time frame for such construction? And I'm just trying to envision, would the existing building be demolished and then the new building constructed? What happens to the market and to vendors in the interim, and what's that kind of construction time frame?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. It's Anton Burkett. I'm executive director at the Farmers Market. Still not close enough, huh? Is that a little better? There we go. Okay. So Anton Burkett, I'm the executive director at the Farmers Market. This year we submitted a grant under the state CFA process for the parking lot. We'll know whether we got that in December, and hopefully we will. And if we do, then the construction can begin on the parking lot potentially as early as the fall of 2022. Next year, we'll be seeking funding for waterfront improvements through the CFA and for phase 2. And same thing, it would be 2023 or so before we'd be able to, and probably fall, spring tends to be our construction window there, because so we can maintain as much as possible of the growing season and selling season for our vendors at the site. And so doing the waterfront improvements in 2023-ish, fall of 2023, spring of 2024. And then in 2024, right, we would be looking for grant funding for the pavilion itself. And at that point, the cost of this new facility would be exceeding any grant funding, so there would have to be a capital campaign that coincided with the grant funding award, 2025, 26, 27, somewhere in there. And yes, we would be deconstructing the current facility and hopefully as modularly as possible reconstructing the new one and doing it on the shoulders of the construction season as best as we can so that we can maintain at least some uninterrupted selling at the farmer's market during this main part of the season.
Yes, George.
Thanks. I don't know how many weeks or months the market's not active in the wintertime now, but what would be the advantages? What do you hope to gain by having a year-round market?
Currently, the farmer's market is a year-round market. We move to various locations. It seems to change from year to year. Now we're at the Trip Hammer Marketplace from January through March. And then we're at the Steamboat Landing facility from, I guess, April through December. And so, you know, it's already a year-round market. It would be nice to house it all in one location from a customer standpoint. And another thing we didn't really mention too much in this presentation, but I really would like to see this facility be able to be utilized more consistently throughout the week, maybe for other functions, collaborations with community education groups, things like that, to be able to kind of fully utilize that park space as city space. There's people down there every day now. If you go down there, there's always somebody walking there, training their dogs under the pavilion is a common one. Just enjoying the waterfront, fishing, you see it all. And so it's a really nice space. It's one of the few, public water access locations that Ithaca, the city of Ithaca has, right, on its docket. So we would like to see that enhanced. Those are some of the kind of increased use case that we're looking at for it. But yeah, in terms of backing up to just the winter market piece of it, we already are a year-round market, and having it all housed in the same location would be great.
Would that require additional infrastructure provided by the city, like natural gas or electric heat, or?
The plan now is for the construction to be facilitated more or less independently, and the maintenance to be falling on the farmers market or the Friends of the Ithaca Farmers Market nonprofit in the future, and so it would be essentially a public park maintained by a nonprofit and farmers market cooperative partnership.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, we appreciate you coming here to help kick off this process at this level. I know you've been at it already for quite a while, but hoping to see more folks engaged in this public conversation. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll see you for a burrito this Saturday. This is my tradition. Next is Louise, and an update on the City of Ithaca's Green New Deal.
Hello, everybody. My name is Luis. I'm the Director of Sustainability. I haven't met all of you, but believe me, I work for you. So thank you very much for this space to give you an update on what's going on with the Green New Deal. We could go to the next one. Just a quick reminder, it was June 2019. It seems like, so many years ago, but it really was just a couple of years ago when we decided to go for a Green New Deal. Where this comes from, next please. Next, please, Julie. So it all comes from, the Green New Deal came from Washington. It was an idea, a grand plan to tackle climate change that happening in Washington. The idea was to, on one hand, address greenhouse gas emissions, but on the other, the idea was to promote climate justice in the United States. This, started in Washington, came all the way to Ithaca. You are all familiar with the Sunrise Movement and the force that they can have when they work together. So we have a Green New Deal today. Next one, please. But then, COVID hit. The next one. But then 2021. Next one, please. 2021 comes, and there is this global risk outlook. We're talking about the year right after the pandemic, and still the number one risk for humanity is climate action failure. So I just want to point this out because what we're trying to do here is really a global imperative, but we're doing it here in Ithaca, and we're trying to set the example. Next, please. We have a new federal government, well, not so new anymore, but they are putting everything behind the fight against climate change and climate injustice. Next one, please. The state of New York is also trying to lead the country with very aggressive targets for carbon emission reduction. Next, please. And just a week ago, a new report was published, basically saying, we're kind of late to the party. Things are changing. It's going to be very hard to avoid an increase of temperature of 2 degrees, which may cause irreversible damage to the planet. So we still need to do our part, but I believe we need to accelerate what we have to do. So we're back here, and what I want to show you now is what the Green New Deal has become in the last 5 months since I joined the city. Next, please. You do 3 in a row. Yes. So this is the Green New Deal. This is the way we're talking about the Green New Deal today. So I'm not going to read what's on the screen. What I want to say is that it truly is a mission-oriented collaborative approach. We're talking about something almost impossible. We're talking about a moonshot. We're trying to redefine the way we relate to each other, relate to the planet. We're trying to redefine the economy. It is definitely a people-first approach. We are talking about elevating social capital. We're talking about making sure that everything that makes, all the principles that make this community unique are at the very forefront of everything that we're trying to do. We're also trying to make sure that equity, justice, and sustainable prosperity are at the very core of everything that we do. So when we set up the Green New Deal at the very beginning, we talked about sharing the benefits with members of the community and making sure that nobody was left behind. But I believe that that's not enough. What we need to do is to put it at the center. So it is a people-first approach, and what we're trying to do is to make life better for everybody who's part of this community. So that's what the Green New Deal is. It is part of a global imperative, and we're also trying to think about it differently. The role of government is not to pay for it. The role of government is not to do everything. The role of government is to convene, to articulate, to become a catalyst for investment. But what we need to do is to basically lead the charge. Next, please. Next, please. Could you do 3 in a row? Okay, so what we do, the first thing that we need to do is to identify the emissions and the source of the emissions. So we, So we identify that is 400,000 metric tons of CO2. That is a lot. We're talking about 4 million cars in circulation at the same time, so you get an idea what we're talking about. I believe there is a way of mitigating this strategy, these emissions. Instead of thinking about it like the way a lot of the time we do, which is vertically thinking about sectors, we can think about it horizontally. We can think about it in terms of cross-cutting measures that could actually help the entire city, every single industry, reduce emissions. So we're thinking about energy efficiency. Just thinking about energy efficiency, we can reduce emissions by 25%. By talking about electrifying our buildings, that is replacing anything that causes combustion in your house, in every building, we can actually reduce emissions by 25%. And by decarbonizing the grid, that is making sure that all the energy that we get in the city is from renewable energy sources, then we can reduce the remaining 30%. Next one. There is still something there. Yeah, which is this 20% that, it may be difficult to get to, but, we have time. We're going to have to take a look at carbon capture technologies in the future, but we're going to do that. Next, please. So one more, please. So in the state of New York, the emissions come from different places. It's not different for the city of Ithaca. Most of the emissions come from buildings and transportation. And some of the emissions obviously come from natural gas, which is used for part of the electricity that we receive here in the city. So the strategy is centered around those three things, but we are also considering waste management, we're also considering food systems, and a number of things that are really around this to make it possible. Next, please. Can you do 3? Okay. So the way we're looking at this is, you know, one of the big changes perhaps is that climate change, for those who do this for a living, climate change is not really an environmental issue. It is an economic issue. It is an economic issue with horrific social and environmental ramifications. So if we treat it as an economic problem, we need to look at it for what it is. And there are, you know, asymmetries of power, asymmetries of information, preponderant players. We have a market failure. So we're treating this, and the strategy of the Sustainability Office is to treat climate change as a market failure. And what that means is that we're going to deploy first economic, then institutional, and then regulatory instruments. And the reason why this is necessary is because first we need to give people an option. We need to give the market an option to react. That is the economic incentive. Then we as government, we need to show commitment, and then we need to come in with regulation to close everything. We're going to do this in order to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And we're going to do this also so the city has resilient infrastructure. We're going to do it in 5 phases, but they're going to run concurrently because we don't have time to wait for one to be completed. So we're going to gather as much data. We're doing a greenhouse gas inventory. It's going to take us about a year, but we're going to do a greenhouse gas inventory to make sure that we know exactly where the emissions are coming from and whether we need any special program to tackle a particular source of emissions. We're going to have a phase when we're going to be talking about efficiency, energy efficiency, also connectivity, and circular economy. I'll explain in detail in a second. Then there's going to be a phase where we're going to be decarbonizing. We're going to try to decentralize energy resources. We're going to try to bring more renewable energy assets into the city, and we're going to try to digitalize energy. We're going to do electrification, and this goes for transportation and for buildings, and then we're going to do carbon capture. Next, please. We're going to be doing this concurrently, as I mentioned, but then at the very core of everything, there is these principles. You know, one of them is climate justice. That is perhaps the most important thing that we're considering with everything that we do in the Green New Deal. We're talking about innovation, but innovation for economic development. Those two things go hand in hand, not separately. We're not just figuring out which technologies are the coolest and we're going to bring them here. No, we're going to figure out which innovations can actually help us achieve our target, so reach our targets, and also promote economic development. We cannot do this alone. We need to have a form of democratic engagement with the community. The type of public engagement that the Green New Deal is promoting right now is an engagement that leads to a model of shared governance that eventually could lead to participatory budget. What we're trying to do is to work with the community, not to consult with the community, work with them. And we're going to do this not in isolation, because I believe that climate change is a problem that we all share. And it is just like COVID. You know, if one person went home, it was not going to go away. When everybody went home, we started, you know, making progress. So it's the same thing. We need to work on something, share what we learned with others, and then make sure that everybody starts doing their part so we can achieve our goals. Next, please. This is going to be very expensive. This is going to cost $2 billion. I don't know if you thought about this when you approved the Green New Deal at the very beginning, but, you know, this is how much it's going to cost. You shouldn't feel too bad. You know, the cost for the United States to do what the Biden administration wants to do is $3.4 trillion. So, you know, it's not too expensive. But then I want you to think about this. In the next 10 years, it's estimated that the US is going to spend about $3 trillion in toys. So when you think about it, toys, climate change, you know, it depends on your priorities, but I can see, well, you know, where the money should go. And next, please. So the next, if you could do several, probably 5 more. Then I'll go over these very quickly. So we have actually 12 programs, so just 3 more, please. So the first thing that we're doing is, and I'm talking about programs because these are complex, you know, tasks that we're implementing. All of them, we're working with members of the community because, you know, so far the staff for the Green New Deal is just me. So the first one is the Climate Action Plan and the Greenhouse Gas Inventory that we're working on. It's all about identifying, you know, the source of greenhouse gases, define our targets and our mitigation strategies. We can anticipate some of those, and that's why we started working. The next one is Justice 50. Initially, the Green New Deal said that we're gonna share the benefits with members of the community. The the Biden administration recommends 40% of the benefits. The state is recommending between 35 and 45% of the benefits. And these numbers don't come out of nowhere. These numbers actually need to be calculated and determined. So what we did was to look at, for example, if we were to electrify every building, if we were to retrofit every building in the city, some buildings require more work. And actually, the buildings that require more work are those that are in low and moderate income communities. And more or less, we're gonna need about 50% of the budget just to address 25% of the building stock. That actually corresponds to low and moderate income communities. So it is our recommendation to have, to redirect 50% of the benefits. And this has to be quantifiable. Like, we are talking about improving people's lives, and we're talking about a debt that we have with society. And we wanna use this to start paying back. The next one is green workforce development. This is terribly important. Right now, we're coming back from COVID. Hopefully, we're coming back from COVID. And the economy, needs a boost. Right now, we're trying to find ways of creating jobs. We have one program right now, I'm gonna talk about it in a second, which is the retrofitting and electrification of 6,000 buildings in the city. We believe that that program alone has the potential of creating 400 jobs in the next 3 years. So we are actually partnering with other organizations. We're specifically partnering with San Francisco-based Roots of Success, which is the program that Van Jones and Rachel Pinderhughes developed before Van Jones went to work with the Obama administration and became the Green Jobs Czar. This is a program that has been proven to work. It targets disadvantaged communities, but it's much broader than that. And I believe that we can bring it to Ithaca, and that can be the solution to create the workforce that we need. And here's the other thing. The Green New Deal, I'm talking about $2 billion. We're talking about a number of programs and a number of things that we need to do to make it happen. But at the same time, I'm talking about creating industries that don't exist today here. The number of jobs and the quality of the jobs that we need to create are not going to come from the industries and the businesses that we have today. We need to create new businesses, new industries, and that's going to attract qualified workers, and it's going to help us, develop the economy even further. Number 4 is really important. This is going to cost $2 billion. It's not going to come from Savante, just half of it. But what we need to do is to figure out a way of attracting investment. We need to become a catalyst for investment. So we need to identify ways in which we can actually mitigate the risk associated with investment in our community. So what we're trying to do is to find ways of unlocking and de-risking finance so we can attract investment. That is the exercise that we did. This has been the focus of my first 5 months here. It's been in identifying ways of mitigating risk so we can attract investment. Number 5 is shared governance. We are trying to establish a new model of democratic engagement. We want people to be part of the solution. We don't want to just consult them. We're also, we're going to implement community choice aggregation so we can procure 100% carbon-free electricity for the entire city. We're already making progress. We're working with the town of Ithaca and Sustainable Tompkins. I believe in 12 months we'll have a proposal for the Public Service Commission, and I believe in 18 to 24 months we're going to be able to procure 100% carbon-free electricity for everybody in the city. We're also trying to figure out a way, and this is a financial issue, how we can deploy more renewable energy. If we were to electrify the city, we were to bring electric vehicles to the city, the load, basically the pressure that is going to put in the distribution circuits in the city, is going to be much greater than we have today. It was not designed for that. So what we need to do is to put more renewable energy within city boundaries so we reduce the dependency that we will have on the transmission and distribution grid. So that's part of the reason why we need at least 1 megawatt of rooftop or ground-mounted solar PV projects in the city. We're already working and talking to a couple of developers about potentially deploying even 3 times that within the next couple of years. Then number 8, that is the start today. It's the Energy Efficiency and Electrification Program. As I mentioned, the first 5 months, and I consulted with the mayor, I worked with the staff of the planning department, and we tapped onto some private investors, and we were able to raise $100 million to deploy a program so we could retrofit 1,600 buildings within city boundaries and also replace anything that does combustion, that is heating systems, water heaters, clothes dryers, replace them with heat pumps that would also provide air conditioning during summer. We believe that the $100 million that we have will be enough for 1,600 buildings. There is a soft commitment from investors to invest $250 million in the city. So there is the potential for this to be completely funded by private sources, and the conditions. We are not mortgaging the town. We are not doing anything that will put at risk the town. This is something that we work together with the mayor. We discuss with the city attorney, with the comptroller. So everybody's on board and understands that the risk for the city is practically zero. We have a program to attract electric vehicles to the city and deploy the right infrastructure. We're talking about deploying 2-wheel and 4-wheel light-duty electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. Just very quickly, what we're trying to do is very unique and it's different. For example, one idea that we are running by some EV manufacturers and by a private equity fund is the idea of separating the battery from the vehicle and being able to sell second-hand electric vehicles for $1,000, literally for $1,000, a second-hand electric vehicle, and then lease the battery for $80 a month. So we are, in that way, we would be able to put second-hand electric vehicles in the hands of the low and moderate income community. So that way, we no longer are looking at the privileged ones that could have an electric and pay for an electric vehicle. We're also looking at the type of charging infrastructure that we could have. And I know some of you have asked for fast charging infrastructure. But fast charging infrastructure, for example, is only beneficial for luxury cars. So we're trying to identify what is it that the regular car, electric vehicle car, can need in terms of infrastructure, so we can actually have a plan to deploy infrastructure. Eventually, we will deploy all types of infrastructure that is needed. We need to figure out a way of doing it and a way of paying for it. Alternative to fossil fuels, not everything can be electrified. We need to figure out a way of removing fossil fuels from some activities, but that is for future undertaking. And then solid waste management, we want to implement a circular economic model. And then for food systems, we're also working with the community, trying to find a way of identifying how we need to handle the food scraps and food donations law in New York State. And we're talking about things like extended responsibility in the upstream side of the food production, those who actually exceed the amount of waste, the average amount of waste, for example, in restaurants. Next one, please. Where are we? Several. more. Two more. Thank you. So anyway, this is the implementation plan. Don't get lost with the colors. It's 10 years of work. What you see at the top are the foundational elements of the Green New Deal strategy. This is what we need to make whatever is underneath happen. We need to have a climate action plan. We need to have a model for climate justice. We need to have the workforce and the financial risk mitigation strategy and a way of engaging the community. We have a plan, and what you see is the way we're going to implement this, and at the very end of every line, what you see is the deliverable for every project that we have in the Ithaca Green New Deal. So we started working and we are running. There is a sense of urgency. Things are going to change in Washington. Things may change in Albany. So we need to do things as fast as possible. Also, climate change is a reality, so we need to get going. So next one. Just a couple of slides more, I promise you. So we're working with the community. We created a series of working groups because I believe that's the only way we can get this done. These working groups are associated with every pillar of the Green New Deal, including international cooperation that we haven't talked about. Next one, please. Much, but I'll explain in a second. We are preparing a steering committee. I believe that this is a project with and for the community. So I believe members of the community should be able to steer the Green New Deal. So right now, and I believe she joined us on the call, Anna Sims-Bartel, who will, I am proposing for chairwoman of the steering committee. And then every other person in the steering committee, Nia Non, Alex Travis, Richard Rivera, Ken Schlatter, Susan Holland, who is here, Hector Chang, and David Kay have confirmed that they want to be part of the steering committee, and we are waiting response from 2 other persons, hoping that they will agree to be part of the steering committee of the Green New Deal. We believe that these people are not only representative of different parts of the community, but they also have the understanding necessary to guide the project, which is on one hand very technical, but on the other very social. Next one, please. So just a couple of things that we have done. On June 24th, the mayor presented at a UN-sponsored event where other countries were talking about ratifying their commitment to the Paris Agreement. Right now, if you go to the United Nations Energy Compact website, you will see that the only city in the entire planet that has committed to reduce emissions beyond what the federal government is doing is the city of Ithaca. We're the only city in the world today. We might not be the only one by the end of the year, but right now we're setting the pace, and we're setting an example for the rest of the country and perhaps for the rest of the world. Because of this, there's been relationships with different countries and different cities in different countries. The mayor shared the stage with, where was it, Mayor? Nambia, I think. Yeah, it was.
Checks out. Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, I apologize, but it was very interesting conversation, about what we're trying to do in the United States and in Africa, for example. Next, please. And then we released an RFP recently to hire a program manager that could, administer the project for energy efficiency retrofitting and thermal load electrification for initially for 1,600 buildings, but in phase 2 for a total of 6,000 buildings in the city of Ithaca. It is the most ambitious program that exists in the United States for removing carbon emissions from buildings. This is, on one hand, very cool, to be honest, but on the other, it resulted in a lot of attention. We got an article in The Guardian, and that's the 4th article that was printed on this topic. It was just the more visible one. We've been working with the local media too, and what that article says, it's very interesting, and I want to clarify. They are not saying this is, this has a 100% chance of succeed. What they're saying is it's very difficult, good for these guys. They're going to need all the help they can get. So that's pretty much what we're into right now. Next, please. And just to finish, so what we're doing right now, it's a project that, we're calling 1,000 because we're trying to do 1,000 electrified buildings, create 1,000 jobs, electrify 1,000 vehicles, and have 1,000 conversations with the community in 1,000 days. That's it. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Two challenges we have inside City Hall now is, one, how do we keep up with Luis's brilliance and passion on this topic, and how do the rest of the staff manage to match his pace? Second is, how do we fund all of this, which is, of course, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. But I think in this upcoming budget, we could take several bites out of this elephant. So we're developing that budget right now, but thought this was an important time to get an update from Luis in advance of that. Any questions or discussion? Yes, George.
Thank you, Luis. This is pretty exciting. When you say $2 billion, are you talking about for the city of Ithaca?
Yes, for the city of Ithaca. Well, and the town of Ithaca too.
My excitement surrounds the green jobs. In the 10 years I've been on this body, the city has reduced the amount of industrially zoned space in the city in a very large way. So do you have an idea of how much space these industries will need? And is there a target for how many and how many good paying jobs they'll create?
Yeah, we're estimating that, when we talk about energy efficiency retrofitting and thermal load electrification, I know it's a lot. We're talking about a number of things that need to happen. For example, we're talking about if the whole city is electrified, if every building is electric, every car is electric, there's going to be a need to interact with the electric grid. So grid interacting technologies are very advanced technologies. We're going to be the only city in America to have it. So naturally, we're going to attract companies that are developing those technologies. We're installing first and second generation, equipment like heat pumps, for example. So it's about the installation, it's about the maintenance, it's about the remote administration of some of these elements. So there's going to be software industries, there's going to be hardware industries, there's going to be construction. We've been contacted by a large number of companies. For example, there is this company that is willing to donate an incredible amount of products so we can have also solar buildings. They actually embed solar panels in the cement, so they can actually offer that for some cities, so some buildings, so we can test it out and prove that it works. So we've been contacted already by a large number of organizations and companies that wanna do this. So I don't know what space we will need. I don't know how many jobs. I can see that we're gonna go over 1,000 in the whole process of the Green New Deal. Our objective right now is 400 in the next 3 years, and it's gonna be all kinds of jobs. The program for workforce development that we are proposing, we're actually trying to develop a different type of curriculum, because we don't want people to have to transition from a blue-collar job to a blue-green collar job. So what we need is for people to have the opportunity to continue installing solar panels if that's what they like, but also to move into software perhaps and manage installations. We want people to be able to choose a path. So the workforce development program that we are trying to set up with Roots of Success, with the help of Cornell Cooperative Extension, is really for people to develop a career without having to go to college. So that's
I think that's great. I think one of the challenges for us is to make sure we have space for these things to happen.
Thank you. I've got Robin and Cynthia.
No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I said Cynthia.
Well, Luis, this is very exciting. It is a lot of information that you've brought forward. The vision is dynamic, it's exciting, it's engaging, completely out of the box. So I really appreciate your energy and enthusiasm. I'd love it if we could fold in our existing infrastructure systems. I notice you have the installation of solar panels. One of the things living up in our area, we can think about solar panels, but we also need batteries, right? Because at night and during the wintertime, that has limited use. I'd love to see the use of our dams and reservoirs as an energy battery that might be available if we could be able to find funding that would support the dredging of our reservoirs, clearing that up, using it as an energy battery, I think has incredible potential. Just a little plug in one of your ideas, see if that might be something that might stick. As we talk about money and so on, and you ended your slide with the request for proposals for a project manager. So I believe that request for proposals has gone out. Is that project manager a city staff person that has already been approved in our budget or is for next year's budget? How is that project manager financed? And I apologize that I have completely forgotten if this is something that we've already approved.
Sure. No. It is for a program manager. What we did was to raise the necessary capital to upfront, the necessary money to do the retrofitting and electrification in all of these buildings. Also, the conditions that we're trying to set up for this allows us to create a financing facility to develop very specific financial products, so we could have 0% interest loans to members of the community. And in some cases, we go even beyond that. It would be equivalent to negative. We can actually offer an economic incentive for people to take on this program. We are asking for a program manager, which is a company that could, on one hand, manage that amount of money, set up a financing facility, create the financial products. What the city is offering is giving them the status of recognized contractor for the city to implement the vision of the Green New Deal. And at this moment, there is no hiring. We are selecting. I use the word hiring. We are selecting a program manager. I've been working with the city attorney. We're going to develop a contract So by selecting them, they commit to help us implement this vision, but there is not going to be a transfer of money from the city. What we want to do, and this is something that I've been talking to the mayor, is when you get money from private equity, it comes with an associated cost of capital. And that cost of capital at the end represents interest rates if you were to develop a financial product, either leasing or lending, it's going to have a cost. So there are a number of things that you can do to reduce risk. So we're actually implementing all of them. But there is one of them, which is a loan guarantee. We cannot provide, as the city, we cannot provide a loan guarantee for a $100 million program because the city would be on the hook for far too much money. So we went to NYSERDA, we went to the state, and the state has a program where they can create a loan loss reserve that basically is a credit enhancement for people that don't have good credit, and that works as a loan guarantee. It works as a form of insurance for the contractor. Then there is the element that if we are distributing risk that way, NYSERDA takes some of the risk, the contractor takes some of the risk. If we were able as the city to create something similar to this loan loss reserve, or if we were able to create through an Ithaca electrification fund, to have enough capital, so that capital could be used to cover the interest, that money would be multiplied by 20 in terms of the impact it could have. So that is, we have right now working with the investors, we managed to bring this down to 2 or 3% of $100 million. So if you think about it in those terms, then, perhaps for the life of the program, just in interest is going to be, $7 million for the 100 million, once you put it to work. What if we were to provide $7 million? What if we were to provide $1 million to cover the interest rates for everybody that is qualifies as low and moderate income? So if we were to use, for example, ARPA funds to cover that, we could literally offer not only to low income, but to low, moderate, and moderate income people 0% interest loans for retrofit and electrification. It is something that Minneapolis is doing right now. Minneapolis put all the money from ARPA, all the money from COVID relief into electrification. So they are developing a program over there. So it is a complicated matter. I don't think it's easy, and I think there are a lot of priorities in the city. So I understand, that it's not an easy answer, but if we could put any amount of money towards this program, we would multiply the impact at least by 20.
I love, I see the appeal as you describe it. Obviously this is going to take a high amount of due diligence to make sure that, because basically what you're proposing is, once selected, it would be a city-backed sole source financer of energy improvements to low and moderate income people, using a financing scheme which is not a traditional loan, and so perhaps does not come with the standard disclosures and education of the individual that is required by law as if you were to go and get a traditional loan on your home. How does a sophisticated how does someone who is low and moderate income, would they be able to have the skills to understand what they might be committing themselves to? And once you have the city's stamp of approval on that, obviously we're giving certain guarantees to that person that they're not incidentally perhaps putting their situation at risk. I think there's a lot of responsibility and obligation that comes with this process. I was unaware that the city was putting its name or its commitment behind doing something like this, so I was kind of surprised to hear about the RFP having gone out. I feel very cautious in proceeding in this way. I understand, and I'd like to learn more, but I hope that we are bring in individuals who are highly expert in these types of financial structures to make sure that in this selection process we are truly providing a service and guarantee to our community members that in participating in this, that they aren't taking unnecessary risk.
Yeah, it is a regulated financing facility. It has to comply with all the federal requirements, state requirements. What we don't have is the overhead that a bank or a credit union would have. But it's regulated and it's going to be open book, so there's going to be a lot of transparency. And in terms of education and outreach, that is something that we're definitely working on. We don't have the program fully defined, but yeah, we're working on educating everybody, because it's an opt-in program. Nobody's going to be forced into it. So we are going to try to present it to the public. We're going to try to present it to them, saying we can do this, and we can do, for example, 0% interest. And we're going to try to, make sure that everybody understands. But I do hear you, and we'll take the necessary steps to make sure that, everything is done the right way.
Yeah, so definitely if you could share that information. And just a process question, did this come through committee as a pre-approved decision that the city was entering into this? Did I miss it, is my question.
No, I don't think so.
So any information you can share, I think it would be good to be transparent about what it is exactly that the city is proposing and putting forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
There is Anna Bartel, who will chair the steering committee. She's the member of the community that will help steer the Green New Deal. The proposed scheme is that the steering committee would be that watchdog on behalf of the community and interacting directly with Common Council, not through me. And Anna Bartel has agreed to chair this community-driven steering committee, and she's here, and I believe that she's prepared like a minute statement if you wanna.
Thank you. Hold on, Anna, we can't hear you. Hold on.
Okay, try now.
Try
Try
again.
now, Anna.
No.
Okay.
That's okay. Should I just?
No, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yay. All right, there seems to be a long delay, so I'm going to try not to listen to myself. Can you actually hear me?
Yes.
Yes, victory is ours. I don't need to talk for long. I just wanted to say hello, to share my enthusiasm for being part of this process. And I'm really appreciating hearing both the really energetic vision and, this whole new universe of possibilities, and the caution and the wisdom and the commitment to process. And so I just wanted to say that's a big piece of what I'm excited about in this work, jointly holding our feet to the fire of our own commitments that include transparency and participation and community benefit. And being part of something that is, hopefully quite literally going to change the world. So it's an exciting time. I'm grateful to be here and look forward to more conversations with all of you as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much. All right, Luis, thank you very much for this. Oh, yes, Graham, you've got a...
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, I'll second my colleagues' comments there about you unloaded an awful lot of information for us. Some of it I hadn't expected. I'm looking forward to playing the tape again at half speed so I can go through the information. But I think it is important to, as we've just said, have this to be a transparent, if we're working with the community, to make sure they understand through us or by themselves the actual process to become involved in this. As we know, many countries have set all these very laudable goals for addressing climate change, and many of the targets have been missed. So one of the things I would like to emphasize is that if you have these targets, and I really like those specific targets that you've outlined, I think it's important for council to hear on a regular basis, I don't know what that is, maybe every 6 months or something, how progress is going and what the roadblocks might be. Because I think you have to maintain this kind of enthusiasm over the long term, and that means showing people how we're doing, I think. So it's really important, I think, for everybody to get a sense of the successes. And the $100 million sounds great, but I don't know how that was raised, what it's going to be used for, how the buildings are going to be. So I think I would like to make sure that we hear regular updates on these programs, because they're exciting. But I still am not sure, kind of, when I hear creative financial instruments, I get nervous. And so I think I want to make sure that I understand and my colleagues understand how this fits in with the city operations, basically. So, but thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting.
Sure. Thank you. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think yes, we should continue these, if not monthly, close to monthly. I think in the 5 months you've been here, this is your third presentation maybe to council. So we will continue that pace and possibly add some committee meetings in case you get bored, Luis. Thank you for all your work you're doing to solve. This is the largest problem of our time. So we've got to do, we've got to take extraordinary steps to solve it.
Can we get a copy of the slide presentation?
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. If you just email that out to council. Thank you. And he puts one of those together like every week. It's really amazing, the productivity we're seeing. So can't wait to see him surrounded by more staff. We'll move now to public comment. I'm sorry, do we have a municipal report? Do you know if anybody from the town of Ithaca is here? Okay. Then we can go now to public comment. First is Susan Holland. Susan will be followed by Micah Beck.
Is this on? Oh yeah, it is. Great. Good evening, everyone. So odd to see you all in person, but really exciting. So thank you for having me. I hated following Luis, but also very excited about working with him. And that's not what I'm going to speak on tonight, but I just wanted to tell you that Historic Ithaca has been working on sustainability efforts because preservation is sustainability. So more on that later. But I'm actually here to talk about the East Hill expansion, the historic district expansion. And first I want to say thank you for the resolution for Mary Tomlin, and congratulations to her. We thank her for her collaborations and research and mentoring with Historic Ithaca. And tonight, in fact, I'm asking for your support for the East Hill Historic District, which was a project that we worked on with Mary Tomlin, with the City of Ithaca, Brian McCracken, the Planning Department, and us, of course. And the city has been a long-time champion of preservation. We're a certified local government. CLG is the terminology we use. A designation from the New York State Historic Preservation Office, and very fitting. In 1970, we had one of the very first preservation ordinances in New York State. And the current plan, Ithaca, reiterates that commitment to preservation. Specific to this case is pages 78 and 79. Cornell University has one of the country's premier preservation programs, and the city's vast historic fabric is often the basis for their education while they're here. We're also the host site, if you didn't know, for the statewide preservation conference this year. Okay, it's virtual, but it's still the host site, so we'll be doing some exciting Ithaca things. So a duty of the ILPC, as you know, is to be responsible for recommending to the Common Council the designation of identified structures or resources as individual landmarks and historic districts within the city. Therefore, we ask you, the Common Council, to support this work. I hope you've had a chance to read the rationale, and I hope you've also had a chance to get to know what was happening out there and maybe take a tour with Brian of the properties. It definitely gives a good picture of why it should be done. So bringing the 19 properties into the district will achieve coherence and allow the property owners to apply for incentives such as the historic tax credit programs that are now available to the property owners in the original East Hill Historic District. And New York State, if you didn't know this, is one of the nation's leaders in historic tax credits. It may be the leader. One final thought, the funding from the New York State Historic Preservation Office and its CLG was from the CLG grant program. So SHPO considered this research worthy of funding and supported the goal of the district's expansion. So I thank you for your support. Take care.
Thank you. Next is Micah Beck. Michael will be followed by Ms. Sabet.
And Mayor Myrick, just so you know, we have about 10 remote speakers too after our in-house speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Beck. I'm addressing you also as regarding the East Hill Historic District. I am one of two owners of 321 North Aurora Street.
Mr. Beck, could you turn on your microphone,
Oh, it's
please?
not on.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Good evening. I am also addressing you as regards the East Hill Historic District expansion proposal. I'm one of the two owners of 321 North Aurora Street, one of the 19 properties affected by this. My brother and I are the third generation of our family to own this property, and cumulatively we have observed and preserved this building for more than a third of its roughly 150-year lifespan. So we feel that we have a better perspective on its history than almost anyone living. I was dismayed to observe how little discussion took place in the meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee before this proposal was passed on to Common Council. I find that the arguments put forth by the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission fall far short of a justification for including these properties within the East Hill Historic District, and I ask that these arguments be scrutinized rather more thoroughly tonight than they were by the PEDC. Firstly, it is noted that the current western border of this district is messy and irrational. This should not matter to anyone. A line has been drawn in the past. Let that line be considered of historic importance and preserve it instead. Secondly, it is argued that there is a preponderance of architectural value within these 19 properties, but similar such buildings can be found all throughout the city of Ithaca. They are in no danger, and they do not need an imposed preservation. If William Henry Miller is in danger, you can preserve his buildings individually. Thirdly, it is argued that there is a preponderance of historical important persons who occupied these buildings. Again, the majority of this city is nearly just as old and has had humans living and working in it for just as long. That various people have eaten, slept, and worked in a given building for a little over a century is not history. Those facts are already recorded, and they are not in danger of being lost. If, then, there are no further arguments, and I have heard none, for this expansion, then these buildings do not need an intervention by this government in order to be preserved. They are already being preserved. For as Tolkien says in his Silmarillion, of bliss and glad life there is little to be said before it ends, as works fair and wonderful, while they still endure for the eyes to see, are their own record, and only when they are in peril do they pass into song. This expansion would not be living history. It would be a museum, and a bad one. Museums are important, but only in as much as they are for the life of a culture. Life cannot be for museums. Let this neighborhood live. Do not let it pass into song. It does not need enshrinement, and if enshrinement is not necessary, it is also not justified. If it is not justified, it is a governmental overreach. I urge you to not approve the expansion of this historic district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Sabat, to be followed by the, and Julie, you can manage the online speakers. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to talk about climate change and how we need to take extraordinary steps to address climate change. And I think there's an education gorge that we need to sort of build a bridge about the topic of diet in regards to climate change. I was actually really disappointed to see that the city's presentation tonight did not in any way address the issue of livestock and their byproducts on the environment, which it's something like 3.5, it's like 51% of gas emissions is due to livestock and their byproducts, and 13% is due to transportation, which includes road, rail, air, and marine. A plant-based diet cuts your carbon footprint by 50%. So if this is urgent, we need to take some personal responsibility in the matter. I would at least bring up the topic. Deforestation I mean, 91% of the Amazon is destroyed for animal agriculture. 1 to 2 acres of rainforest are cleared every minute. This one is huge for us. Water use. 1 hamburger takes 660 gallons of water, which is equivalent of a human showering for 2 months. In our area, we have cow farms. I mean, like, don't you guys know what's happening up in Dryden with all these subsidized Chobani Greek yogurt industry subsidies coming in from New York State government? Like, we have a huge amount of dairy farms that we didn't have 10 years ago, subsidized. These industries, the meat and dairy industries, are subsidized by our federal government. And people are looking the other way as to how not only when the poo-poo comes off these farms and goes downstream, it ends up in, for example, Cayuga Lake, and it significantly changes the pH of the waters. And people are so confused about the algae in the lake. Is that a problem? Oh, the algae problem, which is toxic, it's killing dogs, it's making the lake a non-swimmable entity. And it's because of the cow poo-poo from the farms. Meat and dairy industry uses 1/3 of the Earth's fresh water. 2,500 dairy cows produce the waste equivalent to the waste from human waste of a city the size of 400,000 people.
Miss, about your 3 minutes is expired.
Oh, anyway, I just feel it seems like blatantly missing the conversation about diet. And let's not forget that you can prevent and reverse like diseases of aging, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, by just cutting out animal products.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to our online participants.
Yes, so this first speaker will be Sarah Kulata, and following Sarah will be Siobhan Hall.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Collada. I'm a city resident and I work professionally in the clean energy space. I'm here to talk about the Ithaca Green New Deal. I spent 5 years with local firm Tatum Engineering, and now I work with Siemens Smart Infrastructure, a global company. My team focuses on energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in upstate New York. We work with colleges, school districts, and municipalities. I'm also appointed by the Tompkins County Legislature to the Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board, and I serve as chairperson of that board this year. So I've been advocating for and following the progress of the Ithaca Green New Deal since it was proposed and approved in 2019, and have been following case. Our advisory board has been meeting and hearing updates from Luis since he came on board with the city. So I know that it's amazing, this plan that he's already developed, that is so broad and yet so deep. And he has really been truthing it as it's been developed. He's been consulting with local folks, with academia, with people at the state level, regionally, internationally. And so I think I'm here really to endorse that this is the right approach. We truly do need a moonshot type of initiative. And it's amazing and wonderful that we get to work on it here in Ithaca. We had the commitment, but we didn't know how we were going to get to the moon in 2019 when Common Council said that's where we're going. We had the incredible good fortune to hire Luis, and he is now leading us in a direction, but we also need to provide backbone resources to this effort. He's great at attracting funding, capital, as you've heard outlined. He has great confidence. So, he's already accomplished much, but there does need to be staff in order for the reporting to happen, in order for the community engagement, in order for Common Council to be regularly brought up to speed, for the public to know what's going on and have the opportunity to take advantage, to get trained, earn jobs and good incomes, to improve their housing stock, their whether it's an investment asset or the comfort of their own lifestyle. There is resources that only the city can provide to do that kind of local work, very grounded in who our community is. And so for that, we need budget. We do need to look at what we can carve out of the $17.2 million of the American Rescue Plan funding. And we need to also start thinking about this as a 10-year initiative that year one, it doesn't have any budget because there's no history, but we need to start building that budget this year in 2022 and think about how we're going to work with that going forward. So I just want to sort of validate, celebrate, and encourage us to really put our money where our mouth is to make this moonshot a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Siobhan Hull, followed by John Graves.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Siobhan Hull, and I am a resident both of the greater Ithaca area and a student at Cornell University. I'm here similarly tonight to talk about the Ithaca Green New Deal as a member of Climate Justice Cornell, Sunrise Ithaca, and as a member of our community. When Ithaca passed the Green New Deal in 2019, we were solidifying our commitment to an equitable transition towards a green future. It was a bold and highly necessary promise, and one that has positioned Ithaca as a leader in progressive climate policy. And while I'm sure that everyone here is familiar with the goals of the Green New Deal, I think that they are extremely important and worth repeating. So the Green New Deal's self-declared goals are to, 1, achieve carbon neutrality community-wide by 2030, and to 2, ensure that the benefits are shared among all local communities to reduce historical, social, and economic inequities. These are incredibly lofty goals and ones that I am so glad our city has committed to achieving. However, as with anything, they will remain goals without a plan and the funding to implement them. The proposals from the Director of Sustainability need financial support, community programs need to be developed and funded, staff need to be supported, public communication efforts need to be undertaken. It is impossible to make any headway towards our goals without financial support. That is why the most meaningful way that the City of Ithaca can maintain its commitment to the Ithaca Green New Deal is to allocate funding towards its enactment. My ask today is very simple. Please include the Ithaca Green New Deal in the upcoming budget. Allocate money towards staff positions, programs, community events, public communication. I am urging you to remember the commitments that you made to this community. I urge you to hold our city accountable for the promises that it has made. I urge you to prove that small cities can make a difference in combating climate change and that a Green New Deal is not some unobtainable fantasy. We are a city of great ambition and drive. That's why we passed the Ithaca Green New Deal in the first place. But passing it was just the first step in a very long journey, and we still have a long way to go. Passing the Ithaca Green New Deal was a commitment to action, not just to ideals, and we need funding to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Up next is John Graves, and John will be followed by Hannah Brodsky.
Hello, my name is John Graves. I live on South Hill in the city of Ithaca. I'm calling in tonight to support funding for the Green New Deal. Luis Aguirre Torres, Director of Sustainability for the city of Ithaca, has an incredibly difficult and complicated job in front of him to reach the goals of Ithaca's Green New Deal. Transforming Ithaca to a socially responsible net zero emission city by 2030 will require our community to give Luis the support he needs to complete his job, including funding for staff and a budget for communications and community outreach. To accelerate Luis's progress in reaching the bold 2030 deadline of the Green New Deal, These funds will be pivotal, and the appropriate source of these funds could and should come from the federal and state rescue funds, which are partially earmarked for Build Back Better. For Lewis to succeed by 2030, he will need to implement energy efficiency measures and develop local renewable energy resources and a trained workforce to build and maintain them. At the same time, Lewis will need to develop a plan for integrating these clean energy resources into one dedicated and equitably clean energy system for Ithaca residents. The budget season for the city of Ithaca has begun, and when it is presented to the public in October, I hope we can find a generous budget dedicated to Ithaca's Green New Deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Next up is Hannah, followed by Eva Milstein-Tusnard. I'll say I hate this job because I have so much trouble. Tunard. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Hannah, and I am a senior in environmental engineering at Cornell and a member of this community. And I am also in Climate Justice Cornell. And I'm here to speak tonight to express enthusiasm about Ithaca's Green New Deal as well, and to encourage the Common Council to allocate more city resources to its implementation. The most recent IPCC report stresses more than ever that it's so clear we must act immediately and drastically to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It also stresses that the impacts of climate change are already beginning to be felt. We must prepare for those impacts too. Ithaca recognized this when it passed its Green New Deal, and now it needs to act on it. It has an obligation not only to future but present generations to implement the Green New Deal and to invest in this through funding and getting staff members. I urge the Common Council to make this happen and to help mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Next up is Ava, followed by Irene Weiser.
Hi there. If it makes you feel any better, my own family doesn't really know how to pronounce my second last name, so I think you did a great job. Yeah, I mean, I'm Eva. I have lived in Ithaca since I was 4, and I don't really have much to add to what everyone else has said. I'm also here to voice my support for the Ithaca Green New Deal and ask that funding be allocated to it. I feel like I've been here a lot doing that, so I don't really need to repeat myself. I know like 2 years ago, I remember so vividly asking to hire another staff member, and COVID put a wrench in everything, and now we have Luis, which is amazing. That has been an amazing next step, and Luis has done an amazing job so far. And we just need to continue this very strongly and put money behind it. I think it's, there's not much else to say on that. I just want to be here, and that's what I want to put forward.
Thank you so much, Eva. Next up is Irene Weiser, followed by Sharon Kaplan.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. Irene Weiser here from the town of Caroline. Many of you know me. I'm no longer on the Caroline Town Board. I am, however, continuing in my role as the coordinator of Fossil Free Tompkins. And I along with Sarah Collada, serve on the county's Sustainable Energy Advisory Committee. So I gotta say, I get it, that none of you expected the whirlwind that is Luis Aguirre Torres. There's so much happening so quickly that it's hard to keep track, no less evaluate it. And I get that it's scary, especially given the responsibility you feel as elected officials to be fiscally responsible and to protect your constituents. But here's what else is scary. Lumbering along with a business as usual approach in the face of the accelerating climate emergency. Literally code red for humanity. Those aren't my words, those are the words of the United Nations. Scientists give us until 2030 to turn things around. So most of you know that I've been working in this energy arena for the past 10 years or so. So I ask that you trust me when I tell you that Luis is turning heads in Albany in a good way, in a way that has people at the state thinking that his plan may be the breakthrough that is needed to clear the way for electrifying all the buildings in New York State. Luis is guiding us on a course through uncharted territory. We will literally be making the path by walking it, or with Luis, running it. But I don't know that any of us have any better ideas. In my opinion, the city is enormously fortunate to have hired such a bold, visionary, and competent leader. It would be a shame to see his ideas falter because he didn't have the administrative and programmatic support needed to make them work. When I've spoken to you previously, I've quoted a bumper sticker that haunts me. And it says, "The climate is changing faster than we are." I think with Luis's leadership in the Green New Deal, we have a chance to change that and to lead the state and perhaps even the country. So I don't know specifics of what his budget requests are to you, but I urge you to support them. Yeah, there's risk, but in my opinion, the risk of not taking action on this is the greater one. So I thank you. And again, I just urge support for his programs so that we can keep moving forward and set a vision for the state and the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Next up is Sharon Kaplan, who I'm not sure is here. Following Sharon was going to be Zazu Scott, which I also am not sure is here. Following Zazu is Renee Carver, who would be followed by Elisa Evett.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us or allowing us to speak. My name is Renee Carver. I'm a resident of Trumansburg in the town of Ulysses. I offer these comments in support of the best possible implementation of the Green New Deal. Hurricanes, wildfires, and floods all create crisis situations that immediately mobilize all available resources to address the immediate need. All of those natural crisis situations and others are becoming more frequent and more severe because globally we have all failed to adequately react to the planetary crisis caused by our overconsumption of fossil fuels. The planetary crisis requires action from each and every one of us as individuals, as well as from each and every organization of any type and size. The city of Ithaca must take action with the same sense of urgency for action demanded by a train wreck or a house fire. Please do all you can right now to fully fund and expedite implementation of the Green New Deal. This must include enabling low income and low wealth members of the community to easily implement fully fossil-free energy housing and transportation, all without placing financial burdens on them. It must be carried out with a clear awareness of redressing racial injustices and making residency in the city easily affordable for those of low and moderate income levels. It must include the resources necessary to properly staff positions and programs necessary to carry out the Green New Deal. It must include support to train marginalized community sectors for the workforce needed to implement the plan. Finally, thank you for stepping forward as Common Council members. Your task is not easy, but the community will rise in support when you choose to use their resources to react well to the demands of the planetary crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next up is Lisa Evett, followed by Lisa Marshall.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Elisa Evett, and I'm a resident of the town of Caroline. And though I'm not currently an Ithaca resident, I grew up in Cornell Heights and have lived in the Ithaca area for 66 of my 76 years. I am an Ithacan through and through, and the fact that I shop, bank, support the arts in Ithaca, and pay school taxes adds to my legitimacy as an Ithacan. I might add that what happens in Ithaca affects all of us who live in the surrounding towns, and it's not hyperbole to suggest that your decisions can affect the future of this planet. It seems that the recent catastrophic weather events have finally begun to wake people up to the reality of climate disruption. Lots of us have recognized this frightening threat and have attempted to live more sustainably on this earth. But there's only so much we as individuals can do to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, the irrefutable cause of climate change. We need our governments at all levels to act boldly to make ideas like the Green New Deal a reality now, before it is too late. I urge the Ithaca City Council to allocate the necessary funds to support the Ithaca Green New Deal. I applauded the city's adoption of a Green New Deal some time ago, was encouraged by the creation of the Sustainability Director position, and have greeted with enthusiasm the city's choice to fill that position, the incomparable Luis Aguirre Torres. It's now time for the council to allocate the funds and provide the staffing to push the deal forward. Mr. Aguirre Torres has done a masterful job of putting together a visionary but deeply reality-based plan to realize many of the goals of the new Green Deal, not the least of which is the plan to retrofit and electrify 1,000 buildings in the city. It is up to you to make sure that he can implement this plan and other Green New Deal projects. Make sure that your budget decisions reflect the extreme urgency of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Next up is Lisa Marshall, followed by Zachary Wynn.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
I
can.
don't see my. Okay. My name is Lisa Marshall. I am the program director of Heat Smart Tompkins. If you guys don't know, Heat Smart Tompkins is the very first, as far as I know, grassroots building electrification program ever conceived. It is our program that started here in Tompkins County that NYSERDA based their statewide Heat Smart programs on what we were doing here. And it's my great privilege to be the lead administrator for that program. So what we do at Heat Smart is try to work on helping people to electrify their homes and buildings with heat pumps and weatherization. And we work with people on an individual basis. We also advocate at the state level for policies that help make that easier, more equitable, more affordable, more accessible to all homeowners. And we have had tremendous success. Tompkins County leads the state in heat pump adoption, building weatherization. We've created many jobs. Contractors that work with our program and their employees drive for hours from all the surrounding areas to come to Tompkins County to electrify our homes. And we have people beating down our doors to get estimates for how much this electrification would cost and how they can implement it in their own home and what kind of grants and incentives can be provided. That said, with all our tremendous success that leads the state, that leads the nation here in Tompkins County, we are constantly coming up against the fact that we cannot go fast enough. We cannot scale the building electrification in a way that meets the challenge of the time. And both as Heat Smart Program Director, as a state leadership team member of Mothers Out Front, and a member of the Renewable Heat Now campaign that works and advocates in New York, we've been asking ourselves this question for years: how do we get to scale? How do we do this faster, more affordably, more equitably? We need vision, we need capital, and we need workforce, and we need community engagement. So what Luis has presented tonight, I will admit, I can understand the concern on the members of the Common Council and it's all happening extremely fast. It's big sums of money that none of us is comfortable with, and it is the only thing that I can imagine that will accomplish the goals of the Green New Deal in terms of building electrification and on the other things that Luis talked about. But building electrification is the number one. It is just so incredibly important. One thing Luis didn't have time to go over in his presentation is that this isn't just a climate solution. It's a comfort solution for the people who live in the building. A well-insulated, well-weatherized building with a heat pump heating and cooling system provides a building that is much more healthy, with healthy air quality, comfort, sustainability, longevity of the building structure. It is a building where if the power goes out, you're still going to be more comfortable for hours and hours, even without power, because of the weatherization of the buildings, the good windows, the air sealing, et cetera.
So Lisa, you have exceeded your 3 minutes.
Okay.
If you want to finish your last couple sentences, would be great.
Thank you so much. I'm just wrapping up to say that this is something that we are extremely excited about and very much in support of. It will take a lot of community engagement. We need to have all voices at the table, and we need to keep everybody accountable. And we're here to help accomplish this lofty and important goal. The last thing I wanted to say is that Little Ithaca, I talk it's at the national level with building electrification advocates all the time. They're watching with great excitement and anticipation what we are doing here, because
Thank you,
everyone
Lisa.
wants to figure out how to do this, and we could set the stage for how that's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Next up is Zachary Wynn, followed by Kareem Beers.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Zach Wynn. $2 billion or $100 million is quite an insane figure. And for that price, could the city not buy a nuclear reactor and then just have cheap CO2-free power? I also am curious, how can this reimagining process continue when it is police reform that is the exact reason why law enforcement is leaving the community to serve in other jurisdictions? The police reimagination has effectively reversed the flow of officers into the county in what the sheriff called an unprecedented situation. The IPD finds itself in a similarly difficult recruiting shortfall. With law enforcement as primary stakeholders who literally put their lives at risk doing their job, feeling left out of the process and openly at odds with City Hall, how can this process move forward in good faith? There is disagreement over if there is an increase in crime or not. With basic realities like this under debate, how can a productive conversation possibly move forward? I also am curious, with overdoses in Tompkins County having doubled over the previous 5 years, what effect has low IPD staffing had on first responder Narcan administration response time? When someone is overdosing and not breathing, minutes and even seconds can count. And I am curious if the elevated number of overdoses has translated into a corresponding increase in overdose deaths. Are people dying who would not be otherwise dying before the police reimagination? I also had addressed a number of questions to the council, the police reimagination committee, the police board, and the Tompkins County legislature, and none of those questions have been addressed so far. And I am curious if you believe the makeup of the committee as it stands is appropriate, especially the woman named Yasmin Rashid, who has personally led roadblocks. I believe I showed you evidence of that, and committed what essentially are crimes in the name of justice And I am wondering if that is an appropriate person to be serving on a police reform committee. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Zach. Next up is Kareem Beers, followed by Elmer Ewing.
Good evening. My name is Kareem Beers. I live on West Hill, 2 houses up from George. I'm here not only as a resident, but also as a father of 2 young boys and someone who works in climate change education and mitigation in Ithaca and the surrounding areas with Get Your Green Back Tompkins. We're in a climate emergency. Every community needs to make bold decisions to curb carbon emissions to reduce the worst impacts from climate change. And I commend the city of Ithaca, the mayor, the Common Council for boldly taking on the Green New Deal to become carbon neutral by 2030. So now we must put our money where our mouth and heart is or are. Please support the implementation of the Green New Deal generously. It's been so fantastic having Luis leading this initiative. Why, some might argue, do we want to take on an expensive project and just achieve a drop in the bucket in terms of global carbon emissions? It is true that if we achieve carbon neutrality in the city of Ithaca by 2030, and I think we should, it will represent an imperceptible change in carbon emissions on a worldwide scale. But as others have pointed out, the main reason it should be done is to learn how it can be done, share how it can be done, and encourage and support others to do the same, and to look at our children in the eye and say, we tried. We aren't aiming to be a drop in the bucket. That's not our point, but a sapling that can grow into a mighty tree, whose roots can halt erosion and enable other plants to grow into what becomes a majestic forest. Also, as Lisa pointed out, insulating all homes, installing heat pumps, going solar, walking, biking, converting to electric vehicles. These are things that make our homes and communities healthier and safer, and will create the kind of jobs that will enable all of us to enjoy a home and be able to pay our taxes, even living in this beautiful city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kareem. Next up is Elmer Ewing, and that will be the end of our speakers tonight. I think you might be on mute.
Afternoon, okay. Thank you for the chance to speak. The last shall be brief, I hope. I'm Elmer Ewing. Since 1960, my wife and I have lived on Slaterville Road, exactly 1 mile from the city of Ithaca. We are looking forward with grateful, I could say almost gleeful anticipation to the plans for the Green New Deal for Ithaca and for the initiatives being proposed by Dr. Luis Aguirre Torres. We hope that you will help provide strong budget support for these ventures. We also hope and expect that your actions will inspire parallel actions by the town of Ithaca, which we know is watching you for leadership. In fact, as has been said, Ithaca is attracting widespread attention for its leadership in protecting the climate. Much as Dryden drew recognition back in the early days of fighting fracking, Ithaca is getting a reputation for leadership. That matters because leadership matters and the world's future is at stake. Our children, our grandchildren, and our 2 great-grandchildren will benefit if you do what is in your hands to do. Please do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ewing. That concludes our public comment session tonight.
Thank you. We'll move now to with appreciation for all of the speakers
It's good living.
And the oh, sorry. Some folks. Thanks, Julie. With appreciation for all the speakers, of course, the budget process will start in earnest next month. I'm still working with all the department heads to put together the draft budget, but we are looking to include as many of the priorities of the Green New Deal as we can, for all the reasons mentioned by the speakers tonight. I'll ask now if there's anyone from council who'd like to enjoy privilege of the floor. And I will first say to council, you know, if the meeting seemed presentation heavy tonight, it was, and it's my fault that it's 8:30 and we haven't yet got to the voting items. That was in part because we had a lot of presentations of folks who wanted to come before council, and I wanted to stack them at this month's meeting because next month and the month after we'll be very busy with the budget. And also because we had very few voting items. So not more than 48 hours ago did I say, I hope I did not jinx us to Julie. And Julie said, you probably did just jinx us for a very long meeting. And as usual, Julie was right. Privilege of the floor. Yes, Duxon.
It took a while, but I appreciate the presentations. I just want to give a shout out to our fallen comrade, our dearly departed Steve Smith, who left us for New York City.
Who we should note is still
He might as well be. No, I miss him. He didn't speak a whole lot, but when he did, you knew that he really cared about a topic. And I really was enjoying getting to know him a lot better over the past few years. And it's a shame he's gone, but I appreciate his work and his friendship, and we'll miss him. Thank you.
Yes, hear, hear.
I'm sure he's watching.
Yes, so you should note for folks, Steve Smith is still alive and well, but has, is in the process of moving into a home in New York City with his wife Genevieve, who was accepted to a doctoral program at Columbia. So we are, it's very sad news for us, very good news for them, and I miss them already. George, did you have? Yes, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I hope Steve's new bathroom is better than the one he complained bitterly about in College Town.
You mean the one where he could open the front door from the shower stall?
Right.
Yes, at the same time.
She's not here anymore, but I just want to say how much I appreciate Mary Tomlin. Before I even knew her, when she was on Common Council, I'd watch once in a while, and I was always impressed with how she conducted herself and how sharp she is. I consider her a mentor. Much different style, but it's just a real remarkable person, and I thank you, Mary, for everything you've given to this city. And to all the people who spoke, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and those of you who live outside the city, we'd be happy to take your donations at the Chamberlain's office to help us with our tax burden. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can move now to consent agenda. Would anyone like to move the consent agenda? Moved by Deb, second by Graham. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So go now to City Administration Committee and Chair Mono.
Great, I'll try to just read through these quickly. First, we have authorization of Transportation Alternatives Program application for the Black Diamond Trail. Whereas New York State Department of Transportation has availability of Federal Transportation Alternatives Program, and whereas a project for the remaining city segment of the Black Diamond Trail is eligible for funding, and whereas completing the Black Diamond Trail would connect West Hill, South Hill, and many downtown city residents to a regional trail network with destinations such as Teganic, Treman, Buttermilk, Cass Park, Ithaca Children's Garden, Inlet Island, and West End Business District, Farmers Market, etc., and Stewart Park. And whereas this trail segment is a portion of the Black Diamond Trail as planned and approved by New York State Department of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and whereas Common Council is interested in applying for this grant, Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor of the city of Ithaca is authorized and directed to submit an application for funding to the New York State Department of Transportation in accordance with the provisions of the Transportation Alternatives Program in an amount not to exceed $2,750,000, and about approval of the request to enter into and execute a project agreement. Be it further resolved that contingent upon award of the funds, Common Council authorizes the establishment of Capital Project 888 to pay in first instance 100% of the federal and non-federal shares. Be it further resolved that contingent upon award of the funds, that sum not to exceed $550,000 is appropriated from serial bonds made available to cover the cost of participation in the project. Be it further resolved that the total project cost shall not exceed $2,750,000, with the understanding that the breakdown of funds to be approximately $2,200,000 in federal transportation and $550,000 in serial bond financing to be administered by Superintendent of Public Works. Be it further resolved that the federal and non-federal shares, if they exceed, the Common Council will convene as soon as possible to appropriate the excess. Be it further resolved that the mayor is authorized to execute all the necessary agreements. Superintendent of Public Works is authorized to execute certifications and reimbursement requests. Be it further resolved that a copy of the resolution be filed with New York State Commissioner of Transportation. And be it further resolved that the resolution shall take effect immediately. So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Graham. Discussion.
Great. I don't want to. Is Tim Logue actually here still? Has he hung out this long with us?
I am here, yeah.
Hi, Tim. I didn't want to. You're the one who was able to broker this excellent news that is associated with this project, so I will let you be the bearer of good news about our funds that we've acquired. You want to tell everybody?
Sure, we have a verbal agreement with state parks that they would split the local share with us. So that would reduce our cost down to about $275,000. We don't have a written agreement about that, but I just sent them a draft letter of support that would call that out. So I think we can get away with just carrying about 10% of the project costs.
Right, so we were pretty excited about that, to hear that at city administration. We left the language in the resolution the way that it is because, again, it's just sort of a verbal agreement. So regardless of how that works, the city would still have to bond the money, and then we could just, potentially get that money reimbursed from parks. So we can leave the resolution the way that it is, but we just want to thank Tim for working with New York State Parks in order to get us that offsetting cost. This is an incredibly small amount of money for a really wonderful project. So thank you, Tim, for doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, Cynthia.
Hey, Tim. Congratulations, by the way. I know you've been working on this for forever, so I'm really excited. Can you just confirm to us that the 3 bridges have been funded then as part of this program? I see 2 bridges mentioned in the memo, but the 3rd bridge that connects Cecil Malone, that is already secured and underway, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that one has been, we received the same funding source a couple years ago. So that is in final design right now. We'll go out to bid this year and we'll be in construction next year to build that trail across the flood control channel, approximately in line with Cecil A. Malone. And then this project that's in the resolution tonight would then extend from essentially that point down the east side of the flood control channel. There's a bridge down near the fish ladder that needs to get across the water. And then it goes through the Negundo Woods area. And then there's a second bridge kind of behind Home Depot that would make the connection to the town of Ithaca's project, the Gateway Trail, that will open the bridge to nowhere and provide the kind of backdoor access into Buttermilk Falls State Park.
Okay, and
that project is in construction right now.
Wonderful. So this includes the bridge as well as the connecting trails. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, it would finish the Black Diamond Trail in the city and make the connection to the Buttermilk Falls State Park and Spencer Road neighborhood.
Wow, this is incredibly exciting. I'm absolutely thrilled, and I definitely look to you as the person who made all of this happen. So thank you.
Thanks.
And Tim, I think you said our chances of receiving the funding are relatively high, right? Is that what you said?
I think so. We've been very successful with this program. I think it hits all the major points that they're looking for. We got positive feedback on a pre-application just yesterday. So I think so. And also with our connection with state parks, I think they'll help put a little extra support behind it as well.
Great.
Yes, Laura.
Thanks, and thanks, Tim, for sharing that good news tonight. I just wanted to add that we talk frequently about the Black Diamond Trail as a recreational trail that connects us with parks, but we've been talking about sustainability, and I just want to point out that there are many uses of the trail. People get to work, people get to school, so the trail is used for multiple purposes, and I believe it also addresses some of our sustainability concerns. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, it's a good point. We do have to make that transportation argument in the grant application. It won't fund a strictly recreational trail. That's a very good point.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor? And that carries unanimously.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
4.2 is adjustment of the managerial compensation plan, wellness program, and updated sick leave buyout. This is kind of a complicated resolution. I'll try to read it as best I can here. Whereas in January 2015, the city implemented a new management compensation plan which sought to address internal equity concerns, the city's ability to attract and retain quality talent, and compression issues that resulted from a lack of salary increases in multiple prior years. And whereas it is necessary to periodically update this management compensation plan, and whereas council authorized funding in the 2020 city budget to update the compensation plan as recommended by Human Resources, and whereas Common Council subsequently revoked the adoption of the 2020 plan due to the financial uncertainties created by COVID, and whereas the federal stimulus payments have improved stability in the face of those uncertainties, and whereas in the face of the pandemic, the city changed health insurance options for management and confidentials to establish the Platinum Plan as the standard health option for those employees, and whereas in summer 2021, CSEA agreed to labor contract establishing the Platinum Plan as the standard health insurance option for membership, and whereas management should receive not only the burden of organization-wide shifts in the city's labor contracts, but also the benefits, such as the same wellness program opportunities as CSEA, including up to $2,000 a year in wellness incentives paid directly to the employee. And whereas because confidentials shifted with management in 2020 to the Platinum Plan, they should receive the benefits effective to the same July 1 date. And whereas the city faces an estimated $182 million in post-retirement liabilities, driven in part by the retiree health insurance provided by sick leave buyout, which recently figured a prominent role in the downgrade of the city's bond rating, in turn increasing the city's annual borrowing costs. And whereas the new labor contract and the CSEA ratified said post-retirement liabilities resulted in a change to sick leave buyout policies, limiting the amount of time of sick time that can be used in retirement. And whereas as a matter of fiscal prudence and internal equity with other bargaining units, it is necessary that management buyout policies adjust in parallel with CSEA contract. Now therefore be it resolved that the current management compensation plan be amended by deleting the entry-level step 1 and adding a new step 5 that produces a 20% spread effective July 1, 2021, as reflected in the spreadsheet included, entitled Managerial Employee Grade Plan. Be it further resolved that on July 2021, all managerial staff who were on step 5 of the 2019 plan on June 30th, 2020 shall move to step 5 of the 2021 plan. Be it further resolved that on July 2021, managerial staff who were below step 5 shall be slotted into the salary step that most closely reflects their current salary, and shall continue to move one salary step annually on their respective anniversary dates in accordance with existing procedure. Be it further resolved, the fringe benefits for managerial personnel policy shall be amended, implementing a wellness incentive and sick leave buyout limitations. And be it further resolved that in keeping with the July 1st, 2021 effective date of other portions, and in light of the inability to administer wellness testing in the short remainder of 2021, all management employees who are enrolled in the plan shall receive applicable wellness and amounts in 2021 prorated at 50% value without need to satisfy the wellness targets in 2021. Be it further resolved that in keeping with the July 1st, 2021 date of other portions, in light of the unique circumstances caused by the pandemic that resulted in confidential employees shifting to the Platinum Plan as their standard health insurance much earlier than did the CSCA contract, and further due to the inability to administer wellness testing, all confidential employees who are enrolled in the Platinum Plan as of July 1 shall, in lieu of the 2021 wellness program benefits provided by the CSCA admin contract, receive applicable wellness amounts in 2021 prorated at 50% value without the need to satisfy wellness targets. Oh goodness, my computer just went crazy. In 2021, but in succeeding full years at 100% value, subject to achieving applicable targets as provided in the contract to which confidential compensation and benefits is standardly tracked. And I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Graham. Discussion.
There is no way I can explain this as well as Shelley can if you have questions. So, and we did sort of talk about this when we worked on the CSCA contract, so this should be similar to you, but we're happy to answer any questions, or Shelley is.
Not seeing any questions. We did talk about it, of course, at the last council meeting and then at the committee. Okay, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously.
I think that's it for voting items. Just a quick reminder that we have a committee of the whole on September 22nd, which will be preceded by a public hearing, and then we will have a discussion and a vote on the 5G design guidelines at that meeting, and then hopefully we will have a super short city administration committee meeting as well that evening. Yeah, and now I just jinxed it out loud like we did this evening. But.
Yeah. Okay.
And I unfortunately will have to excuse myself. I have an early trip tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Deb, for hanging in. We know it's been an extraordinarily busy week at TC3 as well. Steve, for the controller's report.
Thank you. Good evening. So if you're like me, you can't believe it's September, but it is. And so budget is here. Definitely a lot of development happening on the budget for us in our department. But so over the next month, we really go through the budget development. And we have, for the 22 budget, we have already had the departmental budget submitted to us. And we are currently meeting with each department. We have a handful left. We should be done with that process by the end of next week. Capital Project Review Committee continues their work on capital projects that have been submitted, so hopefully we'll get that approved here in the next couple weeks as well. And we'll have a special meeting at the end of September to talk about those projects that have been recommended for approval in the 22 budget. So the data gathering for the 2022 budget has been slow, but steady. And just a couple things on the 22 budget that we've currently had just come in recently. Health insurance premium costs for 2022 look like they will be increasing by 5%. This amount is reasonable. Is a reasonable increase considering that the national trend is about 10% or a little higher than that. So continued stability with our participation in the health consortium has been very helpful in that area. In addition, we have heard from New York State Retirement that our pension costs for 2022 will go down a bit. They take a look at the average costs, and based on their averages, it looks like the regular employees' retirement system amount, percentage amount will be reduced by 28%, and the police and fire retirement system percentage will be reduced by about 4.6%. We are still waiting for our direct costs because our percentages come out a little different because we have different options. What they put out from New York State Pension is the averages over the full cost. So we will get those actual percentage changes here hopefully in the next week or so. So that obviously is good news that the pension system costs and contribution for the city will be going down for us. And you know, New York State retirement system is one of the best and largest pension systems in the United States. So definitely good news to hear that lower rates are reflective of the investments that they had over the last year, period ending 3/31/21. So they did a very good job in investing in our funds, and so that helps lower our costs. So a couple larger drivers of our costs for the 22 budget coming in a little lower than anticipated, so that will definitely help us as we try to fund the remaining portions of our 22 budget. On the 21 activity, just a couple things quickly. Sales tax collections continue to increase. We've collected $8,123,000 to date. Our collections are now about 17% ahead of 2020. Of course, 2020 activity was hit hard by COVID. I should say that we still have many concerns with sales tax going forward, including unemployment, supply and demand, also the Delta variant and inflationary factors. And so we'll have to see how those things play into our future revenue collections in this area. But certainly worried a little bit about the rising COVID cases that we're seeing currently. Obviously, we're at the highest point that we have been since the pandemic started. So we'll see how that impacts our local economy as we move forward. On building permits, we have collected $1,460,000 in building permits to date. We're still about, I mean, if you're looking at the calendar and comparing that to budget, we're about $400,000 off of budget at this point in time, but these things come in lump sum, so it's difficult to really take a look at that and make any estimates. But definitely things have picked up since the construction season opened up here in April. And I think that will do it for me tonight.
Great. Any questions for Steve? Yes, George.
What's parking like?
Parking revenues continue to be a slow collection for us. We have collected, I think, about $1,100,000 to date. We're off budget by about $400,000. We had anticipated, you know, many of the changes, especially with the green garage development, but there's a lot more construction activity, and it was obviously the first part of the year was very slow in collections. So we have been making ground slowly over the last couple months, and we probably will continue to do that, but we'll have to see how that plays out for the end of the activity and see if we make budget. I'm guessing we'll be under budget in revenue collections by the time everything is done, but we'll have to see. But we are making some ground. It's just very slow.
Do you know if the other garages are getting more since we closed the Green Street garage?
I believe Seneca Garage is. We haven't seen a big increase, I believe, in the Cougar Garage. Dryden Road has also seen an increase, but obviously that really changes based on student activity. So, yeah, it's just it's a slow collection so far.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Steve, thank you very much for the report.
Good evening.
Yes, good to see you. I'll see you 4 or 5 times again tomorrow,
Yes.
as is our custom these months. And we'll go to Seth for the Planning and Economic Development Committee.
So first up was the resolution I mentioned from the Ithaca Housing Authority. This came from Lindsay Hendricks, just pointing out to us that I guess there was a parcel that wasn't included in the sale, so that was removed in the new resolution. I don't know, Julie, were you looking for a vote or just sort of consensus that this is okay, that we use this version?
Yeah, Lindsay had asked us to give her a certified resolution corrected with that property off of it, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that without at least the unanimous consent of Common Council. I don't know that we need to vote on it again per se, but I need to have you acknowledge that that was basically a typo. We were sent the wrong version of the legislation for the agenda, and I'm happy to correct that with your permission.
So does anybody object? This was the Ithaca, it was I think it was Overlook Terrace.
It's a property on Hector Street, so it was the wrong tax map number.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a substantive change, so.
So seeing no objections, I think that's fine to move forward with that, so.
Thank you,
thanks.
I appreciate your consideration.
Great, thank you.
And then the only thing we have for the Planning and Economic Development Committee is 5.1, the expansion of the local East Hill Historic District to include a number of properties, and I'm not going to name all of them, but they're on Aurora Street, North Aurora Street, East Court Street, and Lynn Street. I'll try to summarize this as best I can. Whereas the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission is recommending designation of individual landmarks and districts of historic and cultural significance, whereas they've held a public hearing for the purpose of considering a proposal to expand the local East Hill Historic District to include the aforementioned properties. Whereas this is a type 2 action under seeker and no further environmental review is required. Whereas the proposal, the commission, the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission finds that the proposal meets criteria under the Landmarks Preservation Ordinance and has voted to recommend the expansion of the local East Hill Historic District to include these 19 properties. Whereas the municipal code states that the Common Council shall, within 90 days of said recommendation, designate, approve, disapprove, or refer back to the commission for modification the recommendation designation. And whereas set forth in the municipal code, the planning board shall file a report with the council with respect to the relation of such designation to the comprehensive plan, the zoning law, projected public improvements, and any plans for renewal of the site or area involved. A copy of the planning board's report has been reviewed by the Planning and Economic Development Committee. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ithaca Common Council finds that the designation of these 19 properties will not conflict with the comprehensive plan, existing zoning, projected public improvements, or any plans for renewal of the site and area involved. Be it further resolved that the East Hill Historic District, as expanded by the addition of these 19 properties, continues to meet the definition of a local historic district as set forth in the municipal code as follows. And these are the definitions here. An area which contains primarily properties which meet one or more of the criteria for designation as an individual landmark, namely possessing special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value as part of the cultural, political, economic, or social history of the locality, region, state, or nation. Or 2, being identified with historically significant persons or events. Or 3, embodying the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style. Or 4, being the work of a designer whose work has significantly influenced an age. Or 5, representing an established and familiar visual feature of the community by virtue of its unique location or singular physical characteristics. And is an area which constitutes a distinct section of the city by reason of possessing those qualities that would satisfy such criteria. And be it further resolved that the Ithaca Common Council, I'll move this as approved, so we can discuss it, approves the expansion of the local East Hill Historic District to include the aforementioned properties under section 228.3 of the municipal code. And I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Duxon. Discussion. Yes, Seth, and then George.
So I'll just say, I didn't really know much about the history of this part of the city, but I did meet with Brian and I took a tour, and Duxton and I did the same. And Brian kind of laid out the rationale for why we would want to preserve the properties in this neighborhood. mainly having to do with the architectural style of many of the buildings. And you think particularly the Italianates that are down along Court Street right there are really impressive. And also just the history of the individuals that were involved with the design of the buildings, and in particular, William Henry Miller and other architects in town that had kind of prominent architects at the time that designed the building. So, after taking the tour and kind of looking at it, I kind of saw the justification that it was similar enough to the rest of the East Hills Historic District that justified the expansion. So I supported this in committee, and I'll vote for it tonight.
Thank you. George.
I guess I have a question for Brian or for anybody else that knows more about it than I do. What would be the downside of this for a property owner?
Thank you, George, and good evening, everyone. So the downside for the property owner, it does require a property owner to submit plans for exterior alteration to either the staff of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, so me, or the Landmarks Commission for approval. And it does restrict a property owner's ability to demolish a building. But those are probably the biggest limitations, is an additional oversight of proposed alterations to historic properties. And based on the Commission's record, about between 96 and 98% of projects are approved each year. And usually the projects that are denied, the property owner knows going in that they're not going to be approved and the reasons why. And then that ability to, or the lack of the ability to demolish the property.
Which would make it no longer a living property.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, Donna?
As a liaison to the ILPC, I've been involved in these conversations for several months. And I had a private email exchange with Micah a few days ago, Mr. Beck a few days ago. But I think his questions are worth addressing, and I'm particularly interested in the question of the merit of preserving or naming an entire district rather than the particularly special properties within the district. I think he's right that not all of the 19 properties are that great, and so I think it's worth making public clearly what the reason is for having a district rather than designating those properties, special properties rather.
Absolutely. So I would agree with you. There are some spectacular properties in the district. There are some excellent properties in the district, and then there are some pretty typical properties. The reason why you look at them as a whole is their impact is greater as a whole than it is as an individual property. So with individual landmarks, their setting can change dramatically over time. But with a historic district, you maintain that overall cohesive feeling of a historic environment. The 19 properties in the expansion area, I would say 17 out of the 19 of them meet at least one of the criteria for local designation on their own merit, either architecturally or with their association with significant local people or with their association with significant local themes. So, the reason why properties are designated as part of a district is to capture the impact of all of the properties together and really allowing one to experience what a historic environment might have looked like.
Yes, Rob?
Brian, thank you for this, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but I was trying to find something that would help understand the sense of how some of these are adjacent to the district currently, and I'm just wondering how they were not included originally, or why. Is there any history that can help us understand that?
So that was one of the reasons why I started this project about 3 years ago, is I couldn't find a justification for why these properties were excluded. Some of them are literally 10 feet away from an adjacent property that's in the East Hill Historic District. They have a similar architectural style, a similar period of development. Some of them even have the same developer as so it wasn't clear to me why they were excluded. And upon doing further research, there were, even in the 70s, there were discussions of landmarking these properties, but there was always a debate about whether they were part of the DeWitt Park Historic District or the East Hill Historic District. There was never, I couldn't find any comments or people noting that these were not worthy of designation, but where do they fit in either DeWitt Park or East Hill? I, along with my colleagues at the state and Historic Ithaca, felt that they more closely reflected the character of the East Hill Historic District due to their architectural forms and the themes that threaded through the properties. And so that's why we decided to include them within the East Hill.
Yes, Graham.
Thank you, Brian. It's been my experience, and I think you quoted some numbers about the number of properties that are considered and approved in terms of changes and stuff. And it's certainly been my experience that working with the ILPC gives a level of oversight, but they're very willing to consider plans. I mean, that's been my experience, and I put a lot of faith in their consideration of preserving. I mean, preserving sounds like a bad word. I mean, I think there's been some significant changes to historic buildings that have been achieved in collaboration with the ILPC. So, I mean, I think, is it fair to say, I mean, I've read that actually sometimes property prices can be, the value can actually be increased by including in a historic district. Can you sort of confirm that suspicion or that reading that I've had in the past?
Yes, just quickly, I highly recommend a study that was recently done for Saratoga Springs. It was done by Place Economics in 2019 that explores that topic extensively. They look at property values and historic designation from several different angles. But what this study found is yes, historic designation increases property values, but it stabilizes them through natural fluctuations in the market. So where other properties in historic or in non-designated areas may fluctuate rapidly given market conditions, typically properties within historic districts maintain their value. So to your question, the short answer is yes. And so you mentioned preservation. I like to use management of change rather than preservation, because alterations are routinely approved for the properties in historic districts. It's just making sure that those small changes over time don't have a great impact on the historic character over time.
One of my early reactions to the proposal, and one which Mr. Beck also picked up, was whether the set of criteria being used in this designation are loose enough that you could almost designate any neighborhood in the city of Ithaca. Could you address that?
Absolutely. So the criteria that have been established by the Landmarks Commission can be used in many different ways to describe a neighborhood, and they're intended that way. But what is important about this particular area and other districts is how that criteria works with integrity. So, the features of a building that reflect its historic character, how much of that is left in a neighborhood. There are areas of the city that have connections to the past, but those connections you can't easily read on the buildings there because they have changed so significantly over time. In historic districts, typically the buildings that are there still reflect their historic character. And that may not be something that you would see in an area of Fall Creek or some of the other neighborhoods in the city. So it's about a concentration of historic resources, a concentration of the original fabric of a building, or number of buildings that make them read as a historic structure.
We ready to vote? Sorry, Dexon?
I just want to thank you for the work you did giving us a tour, but also this novel of history that you provided in the July PDC agenda, which I found useful. But you also knew by heart because you gave us this tour without notes. So, I understand the concerns, but I think it's a district or not a district, and I think excluding a couple properties would break it up in a really bizarre way. So I'm supportive of this.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? And that carries 8-0. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Seth, any other report from planning?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Now to report of council liaisons. Any reports? Yes, Cynthia, and then George. And then Laura.
With regards to the wastewater treatment plant board, we do have a small working group that is working with a small working group from the farmers market to go over the easement issues as was presented earlier today. We will be working with our members to negotiate with the Village of Cayuga Heights to put in a plant-to-plant agreement with the Village of Cayuga Heights wastewater treatment plant. We have what's called the Klein Road Intercept, which had been delivering waste from the old village of Cayuga Heights to our wastewater treatment plant. That is going to be diverted back to Cayuga Heights, but when there is a rain event, such as recent events, anything over 500,000 gallons per day will come to our plant. So we're working on establishing a set of agreements that had been agreed to 15, 20 years ago, but never been signed. So we're trying to address that, and that's in negotiation now. On a new topic, which is kind of a fun topic, I was at a kickoff meeting for a pilot program that the city of Ithaca water treatment plant is participating in with New York State, called the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. So we started off with a stakeholder group meeting today, but basically the city applied to be one of I think about 24 water treatment plants throughout the state that has receiving support from the state to put together a survey and analysis of our watershed, of possible locations. First, they will map our watershed for us, identify our priorities and resources, delineate protection areas, possible sources of contamination, look at local land use and land cover, create an inventory of what we have, and then work with our organization as well as state and other governments to address and fund potential sources of contamination to our water supply. So this is a great program. It's just at the first meeting. I was very happy to be invited to participate, and part of this will continue to reach out to both obviously the city, but then the municipalities in which the 6 Mile Creek watershed lies. Caroline, Dryden, Town of Ithaca, I think Brooktondale. So obviously a successful watershed management will involve participation from those municipalities too. So it's an exciting process, and I look forward to keeping you all in touch.
Great, that is very exciting. Thanks for being our lead. That's a powerful partnership. Yeah.
It is, and the amount of expertise we're working with Ecologic and Barton and LaJudas, And because of the state funding, they will be providing a lot of the technical assistance and putting this report together. So it's a really wonderful program.
Thank you. I have George and then Laura.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I haven't given a report on the Board of Public Works in quite some time because they haven't met. But Streets and Facilities is real busy this summer, and they've done a lot of good work in the First Ward. I know at Hudson Street and Hook Place, which was notoriously bad, has been repaved, and so we're very thankful for that. I'm curious that there will be a Board of Public Works meeting next week, or 2 weeks from now, and if anybody has constituent complaints about the new street lights, I wouldn't mind hearing them. I know that they can be redirected if they're lighting up somebody's living room or bedroom, and I'm wondering if that is in fact happening. So if you could clue me, that would be great.
Great. Thank you. Laura, and then Graham.
Thank you. A couple of things. IURA liaison notes were sent to council earlier today, and there was one request for clarification in the IURA meeting, and that had to do with the Inlet Island vote to include ground level activity. The IURA members presented an alternate development project that I included in those liaison minutes. So we can, and George, I saw your message. How to address that, I think I'll defer to Nels and the mayor on that, and perhaps we can take it up at the next PEDC meeting.
Yeah, probably planning.
If that's okay with.
Do you think it's not? The last time I talked to Steve, he wasn't sure that it was going to be necessary to do that. I mean, I'm happy to take it up there if we have to, but
Shouldn't we, since the vote was all of us, shouldn't it be all of us?
Well, perhaps people can look at the liaison notes and respond, as you did, George, to all. And if there's a question, we can seek some guidance from Nels and the mayor on how we might amend that.
I think the issue is because we voted on a requirement in it, and he's having trouble kind of figuring out how to move forward with the project given that requirement. And so he felt like there was some creative things that could be done with like having some activation like around the building with like food trucks and maybe some like kind of pop-up type things that could, and I think the question is like, would that satisfy the street level active use? We don't need to get into the weeds tonight, but that was the issue that was raised. So if what it takes bringing back to planning, I'm happy to do that. But I guess maybe we should check with Nels and just see what the timing is.
Yeah, we can check with Nels. I have no problem bringing it straight back to full council either, but if it requires some wordsmithing, maybe committee's better. So
yeah, but I think it's actually both the amendments we made are in need of rewording.
Okay.
So again, it can come back to full council.
Let's go to planning committee. Let's bring it to the planning committee to discuss those two amendments and then bring it back to council.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes
Thank
sense. And one other thing I did want to mention, I saw today that Governor Hochul is calling the state government back for a special session to consider extending the eviction moratorium, which expired today, and the possibility of extending it until January. That would allow some of the backlog in getting out the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP funds, that have just been stalled. In addition to the extension on the moratorium, that timeframe would also allow additional staff that the governor is talking about bringing on board to get the funds more readily dispersed. I did some checking, and it looks like countywide, as of around August 23rd, there's been distribution of $342,291 of ERAP funds. That includes 313 applications for payment of rental arrears, 274 applications for prospective. Keep in mind that ERAP will pay 12 months of rental arrears and the possibility of 3 months of prospective rent, as well as 50 applications for utilities arrears. And just as a reminder to any of the public who's still listening to our meeting, that the Human Services Coalition 211 housing specialists are available to assist in questions about the ERAP application. And it's important to note that someone whose ERAP application is in process or is pending is protected from eviction until there's a decision made on their application. So there could be some good news, but it still means that there's the accumulation of rent arrears for residents. So anxiety is still high for tenants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, it's true. Graham.
Yeah, this isn't actually a report. It was a response to George's question. So I've had a couple of comments appreciating the brighter light on the streets and on the sidewalks. But I personally have experienced this higher light on the second floor. I have a street light right in front of our house, and it definitely shines higher than it used to. So if there is a way for them to consider adjusting that, I think it would be beneficial. So I just give you that immediate input.
It's my understanding that there is a way.
Yeah, there is. In fact, you should email Mike Thorne. So right now, we're kind of doing spot by spot where there are complaints or concerns. We're doing spot by spot adjustments, even dimming if needed. So if you can tell them which pole. Yep.
It's also available under the request a concern on the city website. If people want to leave comments there, they get emailed directly to the city electrician.
Great. Any other liaison reports? Is there a report of city clerk?
I have no report.
Is there a report of the city attorney?
No report.
Okay. Is there a motion to...
Jesus.
Sorry, hold on. I think Cynthia got in before. Yes, Cynthia?
Oh, gee, what are you doing?
That's Steven.
I know.
So just to the eviction issue and then talking about rentals, Keith McCafferty from Law New York will be attending this month's PEDC meeting and discussing the 2019 HSTPA changes to the rental law, as well as discussions around eviction and good cause.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that is good to know. Thank you. Okay, now is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Graham, second by Laura, in the Steve Smith position. All those in favor of adjournment? That carries 8-0. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Guy who cut my hair today.
What guy?
He's a guy, I don't usually go to him, but I missed it. Couldn't make an appointment with my usual person. He's Michael at Meredith Bay.
And Julie, thank you very much for facilitating.
Told me that the guy who left the cake on the porch is named
Bye-bye.
Thanks, sorry.
Oh, yeah, Randall, yeah. Randall Frank.
You know Randall?
Yeah. I mean, I talked to him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, he was on my porch for like 20 minutes.
I thought he did a dad